Good morning, friends. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here this morning. I'm Ramu Damodran with the United Nations Academic Impact. We've gathered here on a very auspicious day on two counts. This is the day that the United Nations observes Vesak, the date of the birth and enlightenment and transition of Buddha. And it was Buddha who famously said, "Nothing can harm you so much as your own thoughts unguarded," which is perhaps a good metaphor for the conversation we're going to have today. Today, the 17th of May, is also the anniversary of the creation of the very first United Nations specialized agency, the international, what we now know as the International Telecommunications Union, which came into being in 1865 in Paris. So that metaphor, if you will, of communications, a means of reaching out, of sharing, of being able to reach each other with immediacy, so essential to the Sustainable Development Goals, and the idea of emotional intelligence, which the Buddha represented, come together in the confluence of this conference on unlocking your emotions to achieve the SDGs. We do hope that many of you are also watching us online on the webcast, and those of you who do that and who are in the hall with us will share this on social media. You have the hashtag in front of you, EQ4SDGs. It's now my honor to invite the United Nations Under-Secretary General for Global Communications, Alison Smale, to deliver our opening keynote. Alison?
Thank you very much, Ramu, and welcome to everybody here. It's an honor to address the distinguished delegates, colleagues, honored guests, and friends. Welcome to the United Nations if this is your first visit, and welcome again if it is the manyth visit. This promises to be an uplifting and enlightening day, as Ramu has just made clear with his eloquent introduction. So a warm welcome also to those who are joining us, I hope, on webcast from all over the world. The UN Charter mentions the word peace more than 50 times. Cooperation, progress, development, and equality are ideals and goals that are used throughout the document as well. Indeed, within its first few lines, the Charter establishes the foundation of this organization. The preamble notes that, quote, "We the peoples of the United Nations," unquote, aim to practice tolerance and live together in peace with one another as good neighbors, unite our strength to maintain international peace and security, ensure by the acceptance of principles and the institution of methods that armed force shall not be used, and employ international machinery for the promotion of the economic and social advancement of all peoples. The United Nations has been called the Parliament of Man from the Alfred Lord Tennyson poem. Today, I think we might call it the Parliament of Humanity, because it envisions a world without war and represents the hope of billions of people for peace, justice, and freedom. These goals cannot be reached with the blast of a bomb, at the barrel of a gun, or with the weaponization of misinformation. The hard work of diplomacy, dialogue, mutual understanding, empathy, inclusion, the creation and support of just institutions and respect for human rights is the only way to build and sustain the world that we want. Over the last 70 years, we have seen time and again what we can achieve when we work together. Unfortunately, we have also seen the horrible consequences when disputes cannot be resolved with peaceful discourse. The United Nations has proclaimed the 2nd of October, the birthday of Mahatma Gandhi, as the International Day of Nonviolence. As we commemorate the 150th anniversary of his birth this year, let us remember Gandhi's definition of leadership as not denoting the power of strength and muscle, but in truth being about the art of getting on with people. Today's program on emotional intelligence, mindfulness, and nonviolent communication will provide important lessons for how we can implement these practices in schools, in government, in civil society, and in the private sector. More importantly, these skills can be applied in our daily lives and interpersonal relationships. As we strive to achieve the ambitious 2030 Agenda for Strategic Sustainable Development, and achieve it we must, we will need more than technological know-how and scientific innovations. The skills we learn here today or bring to the fore can be taught to children and adults in every country and in any language. Techniques that help individuals communicate better, reduce their anxiety and stress, build resilience, diffuse conflicts, and empathize with others are abilities that can enable us to improve our lives, our schools, our communities, our countries, and our world. I would like to thank the UN Academic Impact Initiative for bringing together such an impressive group of teachers and practitioners. I would also like to mention that it was a UNAI intern, Fernando Restoy, whose passion for the subject was the catalyst for this conference. Thank you very much to the distinguished speakers who have joined us from the United States and around the world to share their knowledge and to amplify the work of the United Nations. I am sure this will be a day of learning and growth for all of us, and I look forward to participating, albeit perhaps with a time limit, but looking forward to hearing your comments. So thank you so very much for listening. Welcome once more.
Thank you so much, Under-Secretary General, and for that wonderful phrase about the weaponization of misinformation. And while misinformation is something you in the Department of Global Communications counter, when it moves to weaponization, we turn here to our Assistant Secretary General for Peace Operations looking after Africa in the Department for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, Ms. Bintu Keita. You have the floor, Madam.
Thank you so much, and it's a real pleasure to be here with all of you in this room and all of you who are not in this room. We are saying that no one has to be left behind, so we have to make sure that those who are joining us through the webcast are also able to integrate the feeling and the vibrations that are going on in this room. And for that, I want to start by asking all of you to do something which every time I am in the field, when we have the sound, I want to make it that everyone can join. So I'm asking you to do this, all of you, each one of you, and those who are joining us through the webcast can also do the same, and they don't hear the noise. We are not hearing any noise here, and they are not also hearing any noise. So welcoming each one of you in the context of this workshop, because I am been impressed by this invitation. When I received it and I saw unlocking emotional intelligence, I said, wow, we bring something very fantastic in this place. And if we look at the architecture, you are wondering, is this the way that we feel all included? Because each one of us, we have a seat, we have a podium, and somehow my sense is maybe if we were to build again the United Nations in the future, maybe the design is going to be completely different when we talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, the fact that no one has to feel that he or she is being excluded, marginalized, discriminated, devaluated, all of these elements, because even the setting is so much important. So I wanted to start with that and acknowledging that. So thank you so much for this invitation, and thank you also to Fernando for inviting me to participate. So in my time over the years, I've come to learn that self-awareness and as well as self-regulation and paying attention to what is in the room is very important and what is in the space. And I will give you some example. I will use two. The first one was when I was in Chad years ago. I was in Chad from 1819 to 94. And I came, and I was very junior at the time. I came into the job having to deal with a number of the Sustainable Development Goals, which has to do with water, sanitation, education, health, maternal health, child health, because I was working at that time for UNICEF. And we had also the rights promotion and literacy, and all of this, including the gender dimension attached to all of this. And I came there with the assumptions that I knew a lot of things because I went to do a master, and so I would be going there and I will be having people to learn from what I knew. So I went into a place which is called Mao, the Sultana of Mao, where women were complaining about not having access to water. And I said, yeah, top. I know we have water and sanitation package in my work, so why don't we go and we do boreholes just nearby where they are living? So, because it was a good intention, went there and we had the boreholes done. And then the next time I came back and engaged with the women, they said, what have you done? And I was like, what I have done? You have water nearby you now. Remember, water, sanitation. And they looked at me and they were angry. And I couldn't understand why they were angry because water was just nearby them instead of walking 4-5 hours to go and fetch water. So now, here I am, and I have to say, I have to listen. So when I listened, I discovered that in all my good intention to bring water nearby them, what I did, I cut their social time between women, going 4-5 hours away from all the difficulties and the tensions and the workload, because this was their only time to be all together. So, lessons learned, even with good intentions, we have to listen. And if I had listened, they would have said, yes, we need water, but not where you've put the water. We need it far away, because the men, now they know that we can fetch water very quick. They are giving us even more work. So this is one example. And the second example is the following. I've been the Ebola crisis manager for Sierra Leone, and in the context of the response, there was a lot of hurts and wounds and misunderstanding in terms of how the human psyche is functioning, and particularly from the scientific world, because they were following the virus. They were not looking at the people. So the people, the communities, were pretty much in resisting whatever was coming, because we were also learning. And when we celebrated the end of Ebola in Sierra Leone, we had, again, people sitting like you, and we had a podium. And on the podium, we had the head of state, the First Lady, WHO, and a number of other partners who were part of the response. And at some point, as we were all going with our formal speeches, because we have a lot of these, I stood and I wanted to read my speech. And do you know what happened? I couldn't continue because I was seeing in the room people who were the survivors of the Ebola. Families who had lost their loved ones. And we were all in a celebratory mode because it was the end, but we were not acknowledging in the room what happened with them. Because for some of the survivors, it meant that they will be continuing all their lives with the aftermath of the Ebola. And for those who had their people buried, and from the beginning of the response to the end of the response, there were various ways where we were doing the burials and the rituals associated with the burials. So some could go and mourn and grieve. Some, it was not certain that they could do that. So I did one thing. I asked the permission to the head of state, who understood because he knew a bit my character. I said, you know what? I think we will have to break this formality, and I want to welcome all of the survivors and the people who are mourning. And then I started doing this, and I will do it, so you will connect with that. So I started and I said, just that. And you know what happened? It enables people to have their tears coming. So sometimes we just have to take what is in the room. And I thank you for this invitation. I didn't go into the Department of Peace Operations, the Department of Political and Peace-Building Affairs, because it's about unlocking emotional intelligence. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Assistant Secretary General. And that wonderful metaphor you had of the bore whales, I think, is something which is going to be salutary for our discussion, because do we dig bore whales in our emotions the moment they strike us? Is it instinctive, the thought unguarded, as Buddha said? Or do we allow the distance that the women in the village wanted so that we can approach our emotions with some degree of forethought and challenge? That perhaps is going to set our conversation today, and it's my honor to invite as our first speaker, Dr. Daniel Goleman. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Is this on? I'm so happy to be here, and I'm struck by the examples you've given because they really speak to empathy, to tuning into the other person, which, as you'll see, is a critical part of emotional intelligence. And I like the way you titled the day. It's not really unleashing your emotions. You may have some emotions we don't really want to unleash. It's about unleashing the ability to be intelligent about emotion. And what you did with those 3 notes was fabulous and was really intelligent about emotions. I have to ask you a question. Are those from the culture itself? Because those are 3 notes that are also heard in classical music that connote a real sadness. How did you pick them?
To be honest, I don't know. You know, when you go in meditative mode, when you are listening,
Yeah.
so you are able to tap into something which gives back. So this was the moment.
Beautiful. Yes.
Because I use other sounds too, but this I know deliberately what they mean. When I'm in crowd, and particularly in communities, internally displaced people, and I feel the energy is volatile, then I use one letter O to ground the people.
Ah, beautiful. I have to learn those notes. It's really great. So, as I said, I don't think the day is about unleashing emotion. It's about being intelligent about emotion. And by emotional intelligence, I'm talking about a skill set that I think is essential to reach the goals. And I think it brings something needed. I'd like to know how many people here are actually connected with the UN? And how many people are connected with emotional intelligence in some way? Oh, okay. Well, so I don't need to explain a lot. But basically, the goals are noble goals. It's a world we want to see. They're all for the greater good. And they give the work toward those goals a deep meaning and value. It's a purpose that resonates with the heart. And that dimension of purpose and value intersects with emotional intelligence in a very important way. But I think emotional intelligence brings something to the table that the goals themselves do not. It brings the human ability to move together toward those goals in an effective way. And I'd like to explain why I think that's so. Let me start with some research that I became familiar with when I was a graduate student early in my career. My advisor, David McClellan at Harvard, argued at a time when this was a revolutionary idea. He said, if you want to hire the best person for a job, any job, don't just look at their grade point average or their IQ or personality profile, but instead look in your own organization at people who hold that job now or have held it in the past, and identify by whatever metric makes sense in that position, the top 10%, and compare them with people who are just average. And then identify skills or competencies or abilities that you see in the stars that you don't see in the average. Hire people who look like the stars. Promote people who look like they could be stars. Help everybody develop those abilities. At the time, that was a revolutionary idea, but now it's pretty common in large organizations around the world. It's called a competence model. And after I wrote Emotional Intelligence, I looked at more than 100 of these models, some from corporations, some from NGOs, some from government. And it turned out that there was a common set of abilities that identified people who were outstanding, and it didn't have to do with your cognitive abilities. That was the surprise. Here's what I found. This is a kind of back-of-the-envelope assessment, but if you just look at cognitive abilities, IQ, technical skills, versus emotional intelligence, and by that I simply mean how we handle ourselves, how we handle our relationship, and you look at the competencies that organizations themselves have identified as the ones that distinguish our outstanding people from the average, it turns out that for jobs at every level, emotional intelligence abilities are about twice as common, twice as important in these models. The higher you go in the organization, the more it matters. So for top leadership positions, emotional intelligence is 80 to 90% of the competencies that organizations themselves have identified as what makes someone an outstanding leader. Interestingly, IQ is that blue line at the bottom. No matter what you do, if you have an MBA, if you're a top executive, if you're an accountant, what that means is that you have enough IQ to handle the cognitive complexity of that field. However, they never tell you this in school. This is the great secret. Once you're in the job, you're competing with people who are as smart as you are. IQ has a floor effect. And that means that your human abilities start to matter much, much more. So here's evidence from around the world and from organizations of every kind that IQ matters. The interesting thing is this 15% that's in the cognitive category. I think it has to do with systems thinking, pattern recognition, understanding how a decision here will ramify through a complex system and matter over there. It allows you to identify your strategy, your goals, these great SDGs. But once you identify where you're going, you can only get there through people. If your people don't support you, it will not happen. And so that takes emotional intelligence. So it's the big picture, the pattern recognition, that's important. It's not sufficient. Here's what I mean by emotional intelligence in a more granular way. There are 4 components, and by the way, there are many models of emotional intelligence. This is the one I prefer. The key is self-awareness, tuning into yourself, understanding what matters to you, what your strengths are, what your limits are. That turns out to be the most important ability, even though it's the least visible. Because being able to manage yourself well means first tuning into yourself. If you're tuned out of a range of your experience, you won't pick it up in other people, which has to do with the self-awareness, the social awareness, the empathy ability. And you put all of that together in handling your relationships. And then there's the question, what is it for? And I believe it's to have a positive impact on other people. That's what emotional intelligence is for. And I went back to the competence work and derived kind of a generic leadership skill set based on these 12 competencies, each which is nested in one of the 4 domains. I'll go into this in a little more detail. But in order to do that, I'd like to share with you a bit of neuroscience because it's the basis for the self-awareness and self-management competencies. And here, this is a really simplistic heuristic. Basically, it's talking about the executive center, which is in the prefrontal area of the brain, just behind the forehead. It's a series of networks, really, that connect throughout the brain. And then there's the emotional center, between the ears, roughly. And particularly, I'd like to call attention to the amygdala. The amygdala is one of the parts of the brain that has more connections to every other part than any other area of the brain. So the emotional circuitry, the emotional networks, and the executive centers do a dance all day long, and this has to do with emotional intelligence. The brain in prehistory didn't have a prefrontal cortex. That was like an add-on, like brain 2.1. That was, oh yeah, this helps. The reason it helps is we manage our emotions from there. But the amygdala is the alarm center. It's the brain's radar for threat. Right now, the amygdala of everyone in this room is asking a question it's asked through human history. And the question is, am I safe? If the answer is yes, then fine. If the answer is no, if the amygdala perceives a threat, then it has a privileged position in the brain. It can hijack the rest of the brain and drive it in a way that it thinks is essential to survival. This worked really well in the Pleistocene age. It was dynamite. Oh, there's something that's going to eat us, we better run, and we better do it instantly. Or there's something we eat, we better run after it. We better do it quickly. However, today, the amygdala is navigating a complex symbolic reality, civilization, and there are some problems. One problem is the amygdala has a very special position. It has a 1 neuron long connection to the brain, to the ear and the eye in the brain, which means it's very quick in brain time. But how many of you remember a day when television had something called static? That's what it sees. It has a fuzzy picture because most information actually goes to other parts of the brain. So the amygdala always also has a decision rule, which is I'd rather be safe than sorry. It's got a hair trigger. And the other thing is the fuzzy picture and the hair trigger mean it can make mistakes. There are 3 signs of a mistake. I'll call it an amygdala hijack. One is you have a very sudden negative emotional reaction. The second, it's very strong. I'm really angry. I'm really anxious. I'm fearful. And the third is you do something that afterwards you really regret. Like, why did I say that? Why did I do that? That's because the amygdala falls back on overlearned reactions. In a split second, it does something that it sure will work, but it does not always work. Has anyone here ever had an amygdala hijack? Oh, okay. So, of course, it's just human nature. There are 4 or 5 triggers that in the US are very common in the workplace. These are triggers for amygdala hijacks. One is feeling not lack of respect. A second is feeling unappreciated. A third is feeling that you're not being heard. Fourth, that you're being treated unfairly. And the fifth is someone else taking credit for your work. Now, that's a generic set. Any one of us may have our own personal list. So the amygdala can have a reaction like, remember, the amygdala actually falls back in overlearned responses. That means it's really childish. It's very childlike in its thinking and its impulse. So the amygdala could have a thought, speak like this. This guy's not treating me fair. I'd like to slug him. That's the way the amygdala thinks and acts. The good news is that the prefrontal cortex, the executive center, may draw information from other parts of the brain like, oh, but this is your boss. So, okay, I'm not going to slug him. I'm going to smile and change the subject. And that's emotional intelligence. What you're doing is integrating smoothly the executive center with the emotional networks. So it's being smart about emotion. There's another way to look at this very reaction, which has to do, it's very pertinent to attaining the goals. It has to do with the level in your body of what's called cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone that is triggered when the amygdala activates. We need a little cortisol to get going in the morning, but if we have too much, as you'll see, it makes us very ineffective. So this is a relationship that's been known in psychology for about a century. It's that between performance and anxiety, essentially. However, if you have no cortisol, if you're just not interested, if you're disengaged, lower left, these are people who, they're sitting at their desk and they're playing a video game or they're watching YouTube and the boss comes in, they hit a button and a spreadsheet instantly appears on the... They just don't care. So you don't want people to be there. On the other hand, you don't want people to be to the far right, because that means they're having continual amygdala hijacks without the opportunity to recover. The body is designed to have a spurt of energy, that's what the amygdala does, for an emergency, and then to have a period when it recovers its resources. And today, in too many workplaces and too many situations, and certainly in some of the situations the UN handles, there's constant emergency, which means people are constantly having high levels of stress hormone, cortisol. And this can lead to, unfortunately, to burnout, which I'll address in a bit. So you don't want people to be at the far right. You want everyone to be in the middle, at that optimal level, where it's just right and they're able to perform at their best, no matter what performance it is they need to give. So how do you get people there? This was studied at the University of Chicago in an interesting way. They asked people in a range of callings, ballerinas, chess champions, neurosurgeons, tell us about a time you outdid yourself. Even you were surprised at how well you performed. And interestingly, even though each of the specifics was different and unique, the underlying mental state was the same. For one, people are absolutely concentrated. There was a surgeon, neurosurgeon, he said, I had to do a very difficult piece of brain surgery. I didn't know if I could. I did it beautifully, but At the end of the surgery, I looked around, there was some rubble in the corner. I said to a nurse, "What happened?" She said, "While you were operating, the ceiling caved in over there. You didn't notice. You were so absorbed." I actually hope it's an apocryphal story, but I think it may be true. But anyway, concentration is 100%. You're very confident. You handle whatever the changing challenges are effortlessly. You don't have any self-consciousness. You feel perfectly at ease in the situation. And most important, there's a little bit of joy there. It feels good to be at your best, to be working at your best. So this is the peak performance state that every organization wants every person to be in, because you're getting the maximal effectiveness. So, based on this part of the brain, these are the emotional intelligence abilities that matter. One is self-awareness. As I said, it's fundamental, being able to tune into how I feel right now, what do I need right now. There was a brilliant corporate lawyer who unfortunately had a brain tumor. It was discovered early. It was in his prefrontal cortex. During the surgery, they cut the connection between the prefrontal cortex and the emotional center. And interestingly, after the surgery, he could no longer do his job. He lost his job. He couldn't do any job. He became unemployed. His wife left him. He lost his house. He ended up living in his brother's spare bedroom. And in despair, he goes to a very famous neurologist, Antonio Damasio, who specializes in this circuitry. He says, "Doctor, what's wrong?" And at first, Damasio doesn't know what's wrong, but then he gets a clue. He says, "When should we have our next appointment?" And he realizes the lawyer can tell him the pros and cons of every hour for the next 2 weeks, but he doesn't know which is best. Damasio says that when we are making a decision, we tune into what our amygdala is telling us, because it is in touch with the basal ganglia, with parts of the brain that are very primitive and very low, actually, in the brain, that collect our life experience. When I did that, that worked very well. When I did this, it didn't work so well. And then when we have to make a decision, any kind of decision, the brain tells us what our life wisdom is on that. What have we learned that's relevant? Here's the rub. The part of the brain that has that wisdom has no connection to the part of the brain that thinks in words. It has very rich connectivity to the gastrointestinal system. We get a felt sense, a gut feeling. Damasio says this is data too. It's not that we throw out all of the rest, but we have to tune in to that to get full information. I grew up in the Central Valley of California, in basically a farm town, and there was a guy down the road in the next farm town who I've gotten to know pretty well. He almost flunked out of high school. He managed to go to the local community college, took a film course and realized he loved film, got into a film school. His student film was so good that a director hired him as a production assistant, which is like the lowest rung on the ladder in a film crew. But he did so well and impressed people so much that that director talked the studio into financing a script that he had written and letting him direct. And he made that movie. To everyone's surprise, it did pretty well. He took the money from that movie. Oh, here's the thing. He hated how the studio did the final cut. He said, "I'm an artist, and they've ruined my movie." He said, "I'll never do that again." So he decided to make another movie with the money he'd made from the first, and he put all his own money into the production. People in Hollywood said, "You are insane. You don't put your own money in a movie." But he put it at risk, almost didn't make it, but finished. You might have seen the movie. It's called Star Wars. So George Lucas is someone who had a very strong gut sense of what mattered to him. He was willing, He made a decision for artistic integrity, not for the money. It turned out also to be a good business decision, but he didn't know that at the time. So tuning in to what our gut is telling us, what does your heart say, is really important, because this puts us in touch with that independent dimension of value, of purpose, of meaning, which is a guide to everything we do. And it helps tell us where we direct our emotional intelligence and any other skill we have. So self-awareness is critical. Then just running you through the self-regulation is sometimes called resilience. We heard about resilience earlier. It's how you manage the amygdala, how quickly you recover. The technical definition of resilience is how long it takes you to recover from the peak of upset to being calm, back to normal again. And there are specific exercises you can do to extend that. Maturity is one. It's really extending the gap between impulse and action, which helps here. The second, adaptability, sometimes called agility these days, which means you can handle the crisis of the day, but you can also strategize for the long term. Positivity, sometimes called growth mindset. It means you're optimistic. You can see the upside even in downside events. And then achievement, often called grit these days, meaning you keep your eye on the goal. You look for positive feedback, or you look for any feedback, because you're the kind of person, like those in flow, who wants feedback. That was another attribute they discovered. People in flow want to know how they're doing so they can quickly adjust. So with grit, with keeping your eye on the goal, you want to know how are we doing toward those goals so we can change. And I thought the story about the women in the water was perfect for that, because it means we needed a change there. But I think what happened was she learned a lesson for the next time. Too late for those ladies. So those are the basics of the self-management abilities and emotional intelligence. I was in a school literally up the street from here in the 120s in Spanish Harlem. It's a school where I was able to visit a second grade class. These are kids who are 7 or 8. And half the kids in that class, I was told, had special needs. A lot of them had ADD, hyperactivity. I thought it would be chaotic, but actually the kids were very calm and very focused. The teacher said, here's why. Every day we do what we call belly buddies. At belly buddy time, each student goes to their cubby, takes their favorite stuffed animal, finds a place to lie down on the rug, and puts the animal on their belly and watches it rise on the in-breath, fall on the out-breath, rise on the in-breath, fall on the out-breath. This is mindfulness. This is attention training for 7-year-olds. It turns out that it strengthens circuitry that helps you both pay attention and stay calm. That's why they were benefiting. It's called cognitive control. It's very well studied in cognitive science. And in fact, there was a study done in New Zealand of kids whose cognitive control was assessed between ages 4 and 8. One of the ways you assess it is through the marshmallow test. Some of you know about it, some of you don't. The marshmallow test is done with 4-year-olds. You take a 4-year-old, this is done at Stanford, you put a big juicy marshmallow on a table, and you tell the 4-year-old, you can have this now if you want, but if you'll wait till I come back from running an errand, you can have 2 then. And then the experimenter leaves the room, and that poor child is sitting staring at the marshmallow. It's poignant. I've seen videos. Some of them go up and sniff it and then jump back like it was very dangerous. The kids are tracked down as they're graduating high school, about to go to university, and it turned out the kids who waited to the ones who grabbed had a huge advantage on their college entrance exam. And they found the same thing in this New Zealand study, but in a different way. They tracked the kids down in their 30s, and they found that the kids who had highest cognitive control age 4 to 8, in their 30s had better financial success and better health. What I find really interesting, and might be of interest here at the UN, is that the power of cognitive control to determine life outcome was greater than childhood IQ, and this is very significant, greater than the wealth of the family that child grew up in. In other words, it's a completely independent variable that can be trained, which is one reason I'm an advocate of what's called social emotional learning, where you teach emotional intelligence skills to children across the board in a developmentally appropriate way. So that the Belly Buddies is one of the ways. It was an SEL class, as they're called. But it works for adults, too. I have some friends, John Kabat-Zinn, an old friend who's now famous in the mindfulness world, and Richard Davidson, who's another old friend who I just wrote a book with on the science of meditation, altered traits. They did a study in a biotech startup. People are stressed out of their minds, going 24/7, and they taught an adult version of Belly Buddies to those stressed out people. And then they had a control group, of course, and what they found was that the training tended to enhance the power of the left prefrontal cortex to manage the amygdala. People reported, I'm calmer. I don't get hijacked as much, and when I do, it's not as strong. And they found that the more people tipped to the left, the better their immune system functioned, which may speak to that other finding about cognitive control in New Zealand. So it's not just for kids, and I'd like to share it with you right now. So if you'll sit up in a dignified position, spine straight but not tense, close your eyes. Simply bring your attention to your breath. Just be aware of each breath, the full inhalation, the full exhalation, and then the next breath. Just notice the sensation, full awareness. And the next breath, noticing every in-breath, every out-breath. And if your mind wanders, just notice that it wandered and gently bring your mind back to the breath. Start with the next breath. Be fully aware of the whole breath. And now you can open your eyes. That was the very short version of the instruction. I encourage you to get a longer version. There's a dose-response effect. This is attention training. Anybody have their mind wander? That's what it does. The mind wanders about half the time, even when we're trying to pay attention. So the real exercise here, the equivalent of taking the mind to the mental gym, as we've just done, it's like when you go to the other gym and you take a weight. Every time you lift it and do a repetition, it strengthens that muscle a bit more. And it's the same with the circuitry for paying attention. There are basically 3 or 4 moves. You put your attention where you want it. That's move 1. Number 2, it wanders off. That's move 2. Number 3, you notice it wandered. That's the moment of mindfulness. Number 4, you bring it back to where you want it. This is how you strengthen concentration. There was a study done at Harvard where they gave people an app for their phone that rang at random times a day. And it asked 2 questions. What are you doing now? And what are you thinking about? And if those 2 don't match, then you're distracted. They found people are distracted about 47% of the time in their study. Their usually distracted in 3 situations, about 90%. When they're commuting, when they're sitting in front of a video screen, and when they're at work. Sorry, true. So they're least distracted, as you might guess, during romantic moments. But who would answer an app at a time like that? See, I don't know about that part of the data. But basically what we're doing is strengthening the ability to pay attention to what matters to us. This is key to getting those goals. You know, you want people to prioritize them, to pay attention. I have to admit, Fernando, that I have no idea what time it is or how long I have. But when do I end? 7 minutes. 7 minutes? Oh, man. Okay, I'll throw everything. Okay, so I'd like to talk about the part of the brain that empathizes. This is the social brain, newly discovered. I have to skip over it. I'll say that if you're interested, I'm doing a workshop at Omega Institute May 31st that will go into this in much more detail called Chemistry of Connection, if you really are fanatically interested. But just basically, the social brain is a new discovery, and it came about by accident in a lab in Italy. They weren't studying the social brain, which is 2 brains interacting. They were looking at one neuron in a monkey's brain that only activated when the monkey lifted its arm. One afternoon, it was firing, and they didn't know why. The monkey stuck still. And then they realized it was a hot day in Italy. A lab assistant had gone out for a gelato, and he's standing in front of the monkey, and whenever he took a lick, lifted his arm to take a lick, the monkey's neuron for the same thing fired. These are called mirror neurons, and the human brain is peppered with them. This allows us to get an instant felt sense of what's happening inside the person we're with, what they're feeling, what they're intending, what they're doing. It keeps any interaction on the same page. It's part of the social brain. There are many, many circuits of the social brain, one of which has to do with rapport. There are 3 ingredients of rapport. The first is like flow, like that full optimal state, full attention to the person in front of you. The second is nonverbal synchrony. If you took a video of 2 people really having a simpatico interaction, it would look like their bodies were choreographed if you played back that video. And the third is it feels good. It's 2-person flow. So that's another element of the social brain. There's a third that surfaced in a study at Harvard Medical School, where they took a film of patients and doctors, and then after the session, the patient looked at the video and identified the moments when, oh yeah, the doctor really listened, cared, tuned in versus didn't care, didn't listen, didn't get me. And if they weren't tuned in, if they weren't empathizing, the physiology of the doctor and patient was completely independent. But if the patient said, oh yes, that she really tuned in, really understood, then it was like birds flying in formation. So in other words, this is not a trivial connection. There are 3 kinds of empathy. This is very important to understand. The first is purely cognitive empathy. I understand how you think about this. I understand the mental models you use to cut up the world. This allows me to be effective in communicating with you. I can message in a way you'll understand. The second is the social brain empathy, emotional empathy. I know what you feel because I feel it myself. I didn't catch her name, but that was a beautiful example of it. Yeah, just beautiful when she walked into that room. And so this is very important, but it has a risk. And I think the risk is very important for the UN, for some of your missions. The risk is that you will not just tune in, but you'll be flooded by the negative, the fear, the pain, the suffering of the people you're there to help. You pick it up in your own body. And the inoculation is the third kind of empathy, which is sometimes called empathic concern. It turns out that this kind of empathy is based in circuitry that we share with all mammals. Each of these three kinds is instantiated in different networks in the brain. Empathic concern uses the same circuitry as the parental caretaking. It's a parent's love for a child. It means I care about you. And there's studies that show in situations, for example, in hospitals, in oncology units, pediatric oncology, which is heart-wrenching, where nurses often burn out because they feel so awful about children dying that they're caring for, that if you have this kind of concern, caring, compassion, you can take the emotion and metabolize it because you really care about the person. I think this is really important for UN missions too. So there are three kinds of empathy. 7 minutes, really? Okay. So just quickly, based on the emotional brain, these are the competencies. There's a set of primers you can get from Key Step Media that go into each of these competencies in detail if you want. So Key Step Media, it's called Building Blocks of Emotional Intelligence. But just briefly, I'd like to call your attention to coach and mentor, because I think that every leader should be a coach. This means you don't just evaluate people as they are and dismiss them if they're deficient. You help them grow. You see that they can develop further strengths. And I feel every leader should be a coach and mentor also. And then teamwork. It turns out that if you have a high IQ team, it's not as effective as a team that has one person who's really smart and other people that are smart in other ways and have group emotional intelligence, which means there's harmony on the team. We can surface disagreements rather than let them simmer and explode, and has many advantages that I've written about. But I think at this point, since I only had like 1 minute, I will turn it over to my colleague, Michelle Navarez. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Michelle, if I may, before you begin, since Dr. Goldman had many direct references to the UN, which was so helpful, I thought I'd ask Undersecretary General Alison Smale for her reactions to some of them. Please.
Thank you very much for the valuable guide in tracing our own brain activity. It obviously helps to pull back, sit down, back straight, and close your eyes. How much luxury we have to do that in any given workday is, of course, limited. But I think what you brought to the task was the awareness of cognitive control. We can, in fact, control emotions, and channeling them in defined directions will probably help us to do our job better. The United Nations, as you noted very eloquently, has to deal with a lot of stress and emergency, but it also, if it deals with that stress and emergency well, there is a great sense of being able to spread something I can only define as goodness, and calmness, and dealing with both emotional and actual physical demands. So I think it's great for everybody, be you associated with emotional intelligence or more with the United Nations in this room. We can blend those two things very profitably. So thank you very much. I'm sorry I will have to leave now, but I wish you a much more interesting day than I'm probably likely to have. Thank you for coming, and thank you for listening. And thank you very much for the lecture.
Thank you, Alison. Michelle, please, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm Michelle Navarez. I'm absolutely honored to be here today with all of you. And we're going to do a bit of a practice session now. So Dr. Goldman eloquently explained the different competencies, and we're going to basically slow it down to certain practices that we can do on a moment-to-moment basis to strengthen emotional intelligence. So Dr. Goldman and I and his son Hanuman Goldman, who couldn't be here today, started working together about 4 years ago with the aspiration of democratizing EI. and making it accessible to more than just the upper echelons of leaders. And so, but we are all leaders in our own lives in many different ways. And our second goal really was to take what we understand intellectually about emotional intelligence and begin to apply it. Because while the intellect is a gateway to understanding, it is not the same as doing a thing or practicing a thing. So we'll consider this our practice session for today. I'll introduce you to several practices that will strengthen some of the foundational skills of emotional intelligence that Dr. Goleman spoke about earlier. So let's go on this journey. How many of you have done a body scan before? Okay, that's most everybody. We're going to do one now. I'll lead you in this. All right, so in the same way that Dr. Goleman led us through a brief mindfulness practice, I'd ask that you take a seat and have your feet on the floor. Take kind of a dignified posture, kind of like I'm waking up, rousing yourself. All right, you can gently shut your eyes if you like, or just look at a 45-degree angle down. And I'll just take you through a brief practice here of a body scan. So gather the threads of your attention, wherever they might be right now. Maybe they're thinking about all the things you need to do, or that you need to go to the bathroom, or that you don't have water, these kinds of things. And just pull in the threads of your attention. Take a deep breath in, and exhale any kind of feeling you might have of stress or carrying things. You can just set that backpack down, so to say, of all the things you might be worrying about. I'd like you to bring your focus to your breath. However you find it in your body, and breathe naturally. You might perceive it to be in or out, or up and down. But just breathe naturally. And while you do this, notice where your attention is at. Just notice the fact that you have the capacity to be aware. Just notice that in yourself right now. And we're going to move that awareness along to different places in your body, starting with your feet. Just notice how your feet meet the floor, how that feels. You can wiggle your toes if you like to get a sense of your feet and your shoes. And then move your awareness up from your feet to your ankles. And now your calves. And as you do this, just notice the quality of your awareness and your ability to pay attention, in this case, to how you're feeling physically. And bring your awareness to your knees and your thighs. Notice the weight of your body as you sit on your chair. And from there, notice your shoulders and your arms and your midsection. As you breathe in and out, you can feel your ribs move in and out. And you bring attention to your arms and your hands and your fingers. You can wiggle your fingers if you like. And bringing your attention to now your neck, noticing any tension, just lift your shoulders and drop them. You can do that a few times if you like. And then bring your attention to your scalp and your head, and then the very top of your head. And just let your awareness rest throughout your body. Envision just you've gone through this wakening up your senses. And take a deep breath in, and exhale, and come back to center. How was that? Was that grounding? It was for me. That's why I did it. Partially. Okay, so here are the Sustainable Development Goals, okay? There are a lot of them, and they're very ambitious, and they're the right goals. And when I started thinking in preparation for being here and talking to you about emotional intelligence and how we can build our capacity in emotional intelligence, I thought, what do these have in common? And I thought and thought about it, and then I thought, well, it actually requires a global mindset. And in order to achieve these, we actually have to prioritize the well-being of others as much as our own and our closest family members, if not more so. And that is the crux of succeeding at these, is having the belief that that's important to do it, and B, the understanding of our interconnectedness. Because a lot of these things are actually possible now, but there's some gap in our ability to mobilize and do them, both because they're complex and there's a certain amount of creativity involved and scale that is quite significant. But I'm going to spend the next little while talking about this concept of what it means to all be connected on a profound level like we are. So I also thought, what do the sustainable goals and emotional intelligence have in common? And I thought that it's something similar when you're trying to build a new habit. You have to know what it is you're doing and how to do it. It has to be something that's actually doable. We have to do the doable things. And it has to be repeatable. And then finally, we have to be able to course correct when there are shifts and changes, which there always are. There always are. So we have to be nimble. And when it comes down to it, this is the same, really, when you're developing emotional intelligence, just like the practices we're introducing to you now. Okay? So like Dr. Goleman said, emotional intelligence basically comes down to you, your emotions, how you handle them, and how you care for others, and how you react to other people's emotions as well. They become the gateway to developing our positive human qualities. They give us something to anchor to, and they're an evidence-based framework that allows us to tap into our positive qualities and that which is who we are when we are at our best. And in a nutshell, that is emotional intelligence. Yes, there are all these competencies, and it can be a little overwhelming to think, well, where do I start? And that's why we start talking about the foundational skills of emotional intelligence, which we'll go into here in a minute. So if we were to apply emotional intelligence to the sustainable goals, what might that look like? What might be possible? Well, let's see. Let's take a look.
Get off my, get the hell off my cap. Move, 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 move. Hey, you cut me off. Get me stuck on this light forever, your mother. Oh, man. What is wrong with you?
thief!
I didn't steal anything!
Hey,
You
man,
break
get your
things.
hands
You
off my
break
damn
things.
son!
The people let the kids
people?
around here
What?
like wild animals.
Wild animals, you come in my neighborhood trying to
You
take
come to
over.
my store.
We got back. Where did you learn to speak like this?
Your father, he never blew the horn once.
You're so hot-tempered. So I am hot-tempered, so please just let's drop it.
I did not raise you that way.
Leave me alone.
Beta, take a breath. Breathe. The people let the kids run around here low and try to steal
You
things.
better back the hell off.
Oh, what, huh? Breathe. One more time.
All my friends, brothers and sisters, please keep your own mind, your own heart more compassionate, sense of concern of others' well-being. Best present of my birthday.
So I can never see that without crying or just feeling that emotion and that feeling of wetness. We need to do that more, actually. And what is it at the heart, ultimately, of emotional intelligence? I would argue it's our personal agency and our global agency. And the way I would define that is that our personal agency is that which we have influence over within ourselves, the possibility anyway of influencing. And our global agency is our capacity to positively impact the lives of others. That's what we need to ignite. So how do we do that? How do we unlock our personal and global agency? Well, as we're talking about, it is through the foundational skills of emotional intelligence. But when we look at it and we really break it down at like, I own this. Where is my piece? Where is my part? Where do we find our agency? We find it right now in the present moment. There is no other moment in which we can ignite our agency. We have that opportunity now, and the next now, and the next now after that. And that's both very daunting because we have to do it a lot and consistently, but we also have the opportunity to practice a lot. And when we don't succeed, we can try the next moment. But it comes down to recognizing our agency in that moment. And if you look back to the film, right, not only does it happen in the present moment, but we have a momentum with our emotions and our thoughts and our beliefs, and they move imperceptibly, but they impact everybody else around us, like you could see in that video. And so at the same time we're creating the momentum for ourselves, it comes into the intersection of everybody else's momentum. And that is the ripple effect. And if we miss the opportunity in the present moment because we don't see those little moments of spaces or gaps between what occurs to us and then how we respond, then we miss our opportunity for agency, let alone global agency, right? And so the training, the thought is that with practices like Dr. Goleman showed us of awareness of breath, or the practice I did around the body scan, which basically allows you to understand and identify and locate in your body how are emotions manifesting, because our bodies are usually our first sign that emotions are present. And if we can get into the habit of noticing how we feel, then that's our cue. We get a little bit more buffer zone that next time somebody cuts us off in traffic or we get frustrated. The other thing that we see occurring a lot these days because of the stress, this power stress that we're all, kind of experiencing in our lives. Okay, I just have to have some water. It makes it tougher when we're experiencing stress to be able to notice the moments. They just go by us like a fast car. So I want to experiment here. Think about your morning. Everything that you did from the time you woke up to right now, just take a second and kind of visualize for yourself. What were those moments for you today before you got here? Just take a few seconds and just think about your morning. Maybe it was an amygdala hijack. Maybe it was your dreams. You woke up and you had sort of some emotional valence from your night before. Think about where were those moments, those salient moments, decision points, where you could have done exactly what you did or something different. That's a very powerful thought, because think about if everybody woke up every day with the intention that they're going to notice those moments where they have the capacity to make an impact. Wow, that's a lot of moments. And we each can actually do that. And that is what the work is about for us as humans, I think. And it doesn't really stop, it just keeps going. And so that's the opportunity. We're going to do a practice together. How many of you have heard just like me or done just like me? We're going to do that now together. And so for those of you who are tuning in remotely, I'd like you just to visualize someone in front of you. Maybe it's someone you care about. Maybe it's a coworker or a family member. But those of you who are here, what I'd like you to do is stand up. And I want you to find a partner. Just turn to whoever's by your side. If there's not an even number, just do 3. And I'm going to guide you through this practice, okay? Okay, I want you to introduce yourself briefly to each other. Okay? Maybe I should have been more specific. Okay. So now I'm going to ask you if you're comfortable. If I know, I should have given better instructions. All right, so I'm going to ask you if I could only whistle, but I can't. I'm going to ask if you feel comfortable keeping your eyes open while you do this. That's the best thing. But if you don't, that's also okay. So just face each other in a comfortable distance from one another. And I'm going to read, and you're not going to repeat me necessarily. Mentally, yes, you're going to repeat me, but I'm going to be the only one talking here, or you won't be able to hear me. Okay. So, all right. So become aware that there is a person in front of you, a fellow human being just like you. Now silently repeat these phrases while looking at your partner silently. This person has a body and a mind just like me. This person has feelings and emotions and thoughts just like me. This person has in his or her life experienced physical and emotional pain and suffering just like me. This person has at some point been sad, disappointed, angry, or hurt just like me. This person has felt unworthy or inadequate just like me. This person worries and is frightened sometimes just like me. And this person has longed for friendship just like me. This person is learning about life just like me. And this person wants to be caring and kind to others just like me. They want to be content with what life has given. They want to be free from pain and suffering. This person wishes to be safe and healthy just like me. And they want to be happy and loved. Now allow for some wishes for well-being to arise. And have the thought, I wish that this person have the strength, the resources, and social support to navigate the difficulties in life with ease. I wish that this person be free from pain and suffering, that they be peaceful and happy. And I wish this person be loved, because this person is a fellow human being just like me. And after a few moments, thank your partner, bow, or whatever way feels appropriate.
You're almost there.
Perfect. All right, bye, Dan. Okay. Thanks. So what did you think? I think you liked it. So how often do we take even just that little time to connect with each other and to really look at somebody and look in their eyes and have that feeling of they are just like me? And we need to do that more. We need to get wet inside. If we stay like the rock at the bottom of the river and inside that rock is always dry, then we didn't do our jobs. We need to allow ourselves to get a little wet and emotional sometimes and connect. Okay, I'm running a little long. And so Dan, Dr. Goldman, sorry, I had a hard time initially calling him Dan when I first started working with him, but Dr. Goldman did a fabulous job explaining the competencies. I certainly couldn't do a better job, so I won't. And just to remind you, the foundational skills allow us the capacity to find those moments where we can exercise that choice of how we're going to show up at our best. And the more we do that, the more often we can do that. And if you do nothing else, that's what it is. I mean, make it simple for yourself. If you can do nothing else other than that. Do the doable things. And when we activate our personal and global agency, we can choose our thoughts and our actions and how we show up for ourselves and other people. and we're more intentional. And so with that, I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, and for Dr. Goldman's presentation as well. A couple of points. I think Dr. Goldman used the wonderful phrase self-awareness. And I remember once talking to a representative from a new member of the United Nations, and she said to me, when we got our independence, we secured our identity. When we joined the United Nations, we were able to express our self-awareness. And I think the points that Dr. Goldman made about how individuals sometimes feel a little lonely or unappreciated, not heard, go for nation states as well. The idea of other people taking credit for your work when a country exports its primary resources to a manufacturing country, and it is a manufacturing country that gets the credit rather than the source of the commodity, that is, to use your wonderful phrase, Michelle, an expression of how the global agency and the personal agency come into conflict. And in a sense, I think the Sustainable Development Goals, as this conversation has shown us, are all about personal agency and personal change becoming global agency and global change. So we're very grateful for that. Thank you, Michelle. And now I'm honored to invite Patricia Friedman to make her presentation.
Wow, this is a really big room. It's an honor to be here today to speak with you about how we can use emotional intelligence to build capacity in youth and inside ourselves as we take on the biggest challenges that we have yet to face. So today I'm going to share a few projects with you, and then I'll give you some tools, some EQ tools you can take home in your pocket. Now, we all know that EQ is great stuff, but you can't, touch it. And for many people, seeing is believing. So what if I could show you EQ today? So look around the room for 1 second. Take it in. And now get out that blue envelope we gave you earlier. And inside are a pair of EQ glasses. Go ahead and put them on. And now look around, and especially look at the lights. And what do you see? You see sparkles? Sorry. Thank you. Do you see sparkles, unicorns, rainbows? Well, none of that's EQ. These glasses are just a metaphor for us. And they illuminate the visible light, the full spectrum of that which was unseen before. And EQ is just the same. Now, without EQ, we would be missing all of the messages that are flowing between people and inside ourselves. We'd be reacting instead of responding. And but with emotional data, we can make informed decisions about our responses. So I'd like to give you a very simple definition for emotional intelligence today. It's simply being smarter with feelings. And EQ is for everyone, for all sectors, all ages, all over the world. And at 6 seconds, we want 1 billion people practicing emotional intelligence because we believe it is truly the force that will change this world. We know that EQ works. We've been doing this for over 20 years, and we have experience and the data. And here you can see a scatter graph based on our robust, validated, normed assessment. This is from the world's largest study of emotional intelligence, and it represents a randomized sample from 124 countries. And what you can see is that when EQ scores increase, success increases. Now, success, you're thinking, what's that? I'm talking about quality of life, effectiveness, decision-making, relationships. And this trend holds for both our adult and youth samples. Now, EQ is learnable, not fixed. And we have proven tools and methods that are effective for growing EQ at any age. And I'd like to just take a minute to tell you a little about 6 seconds and why we do this work. So back in 1992, when Dan Goleman was doing research for his book, he visited a little school in California that was implementing an early version of our program. And when that book became a blockbuster hit, and I see it sitting here on the table, the school was inundated with calls, and not just from educators, but from people all over the world saying, can you teach us how to do this EQ stuff? We want it in our company. We want it in our hospital, on our team, in our organization. And so 6 Seconds was created in 1997 to reach that need, to teach people how to practice EQ. And the name 6 Seconds comes from the work of Dr. Candace Pert and her research on molecules of emotion. She said that it takes only 6 seconds for neurohormones to pass through the brain and through your body. And if after 6 seconds you're still feeling something, it's because in some sense you're re-choosing it. Oops. Our work is focused on how we use emotional intelligence. Our model is, and this is in our model, we want people to use EQ to help them think, feel, and act. And our model is in a circle because we believe that all three are connected seamlessly in a practice of processing EQ. And now, while we work with many organizations and corporations all over the world, today I'm specifically going to focus on the space of social and emotional learning. I want to make a case for SEL as a strategic and systemic tool to get us to achieve the SDGs. And just 1 second, I want everyone to know that the pin I'm wearing and this symbol is the symbol for the Sustainable Development Goals. There's 17 goals that the UN has established as targets for us to grow and develop the planet. So here's the key question. How can we build capacity inside ourselves, in children and adults, to make changes towards solving those biggest challenges that we face? Whoops. Because at their roots, the SDGs are people problems. And technology innovations will help. And of course, legislation is essential. But unless we get the people in the room to change, we will not achieve the SDGs. So let's take a look at 2 examples of projects that we're working on, of how we're using SEL to fuel that necessary change. Let's look at SEL in action. So many of you know the work of Professor Wangari Maathai and the Green Belt movement. Now, she was the first African woman and the first environmentalist to win the Nobel Peace Prize in 2004 for her work on environmental, social, and political activism. She's the OG for SDGs. She was doing SDGs before there were SDGs. Take a look at this quote from her. Now that is capacity building. Professor Maathai's foundation had been working in Kenya for many, many years, but they faced systemic corruption and widespread disengagement for the environment in Kenya. Oops. Her organization was very good at planting trees, but it was not reaching the success it wanted. And for change to get there, they knew they had to get better at working with people. And so they asked the harder question: what would it take to grow courageous leaders for our planet? Imagine a whole generation of hummingbirds, each doing their small part, but working together. And so we started working with the Wangari Maathai Foundation as partners to develop these future leaders. And now the foundation is focused on a very long-term strategy: changing a generation. They started with 10-year-olds in village schools. And we're partnering with them to develop measurable EQ skills for environmental leadership. Now, I want to mention that this is a systems-wide approach, not just an add-on program or a special class in schools. The foundation is in a long-term relationship with administrators, teachers, and parents to build the necessary skills and engagement required for these students. Because for change to last, for real change, we need to address the system where the change is taking place. Now, it's too early in this project for me to share real results with you, but what we can see at this point is a hunger for the skills that build capacity for environmental leadership. Now, I shared just one program with you, touching on a cluster of schools. But let's be real, we can't build capacity to change the world if we're limited to a handful of teachers in rural schools, even though they're pretty incredible. We need to zoom out a little bit, and that's what we did with this next project. Pop-up festivals for well-being, emotional intelligence, and children's rights is an audacious capacity-building project for the SDGs. Now, just a quick bit of history, since we might be in one of the rooms where this actually happened. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the CRC. It's become the most widely ratified human rights treaty in history, and it's transformed thousands of children's lives all over the world, and it is truly remarkable. And while these laws are essential, unfortunately, we can look around the world today and see that legislation is not enough to change child exploitation. And if the CRC is not enough, what's it going to take? What is the difference that's going to make the difference? What's the systemic change? And how can we actually build capacity for children's rights? Now, it seems clear that in order to make this change, we need to address the adults in the room around these children that we're trying to support, and we need them to have more EQ skills. And in fact, based on work from our partner in Singapore, our data suggests that when parents and teachers are practicing EQ, children in their care develop EQ. So we need to engage adults and children together, and we created pop-up festivals to meet this need. So this is a very short movie. I'm just going to show you what pop-up festivals look like. So pop-up festivals are in their second year of partnering with UNICEF World Children's Day. And now this is a free event, and it's volunteer run. And this year will reach 1.5 million children and adults around the world in 174 countries and in 16 languages. Pop-Up Festival is the world's largest EQ event, and it also happens to be a lot of fun. Through this experience, children get to learn more about what's inside of them, to discover and to name their feelings. Adults tell us that they've never talked about these kinds of topics with their child before, and it was like building a bridge, the ability to talk about what's really going on underneath. Now, for many children, especially in post-conflict areas, recognizing the emotional life inside of them is key to healthy development. It's the difference that can build capacity in every child. Now, what lessons can we learn from the Wangari Maathai Foundation or from Pop-Up Festival? And in all of our work over the last 21 years in schools and universities, is that a child lives within a system. And we cannot make positive change for that child, teach them EQ skills, or give them rights, or whatever our mission happens to be, without considering all the layers outside of the child. Can you just think for a minute of the parents and the teachers and the caregivers? Think of all those organizations and the governments and the policymakers and every person that works in this building. We are all part of that child's system, and we need EQ in all of the layers. Now, SEL will never succeed if we make it an extra, and that's why we've been working to integrate EQ into schools at a systems level, and that means for everyone. Our scope and sequence is a model for how EQ can grow from age 4 to 104, and how the stages build up from a foundation. Our work with Columbia Teachers College, how we're supporting pre-service school administrators to help them find their noble goal, their purpose, will help them fuel and support their urgent work. Another project we're doing with our partners in Italy is to work with an Italian university to assess the skills that make people successful in business, mostly relational, and the skills that students are learning at that university, mostly technical. And what's so interesting is the space between there. Education is all about building capacity, and we need to make sure that we're creating what students actually need, and that EQ is an essential part of that. We've developed assessments to measure EQ for students and for educators, and to show progress when schools implement EQ into their communities. We know what a vital classroom looks like. We've put on our EQ glasses, and we can see EQ shining brightly. And so, this is where you all come in. What I want to do is give you a push today, to give you support for the hard work that you're doing to support these essential goals. Here's our challenge. How are we going to achieve the SDGs without a lot more resources? Now, whatever work you're doing, whatever mission is driving you, I can guarantee you need EQ. And it's a 100% renewable resource, and it's already inside of you. So let's see how we can access it. So in that blue envelope is this rainbow-colored sticker. And it's called the Plutchik model for emotions, and we use it frequently in our work. Now, on this model, there are 8 basic emotions, and there are variations on each. And like the colors, the emotion words move outward with less intensity. So let's use this for a very quick activity. Can you think of a recent situation, a conflict, maybe a hard conversation you've had? Can you see a word on this model that might match your feeling? And what if that feeling were there for a reason, to help you? For example, I'm standing here and I'm flooded with anxiety, but I know that that's because this is a really important moment for me, and I have to pay attention. So what is your feeling telling you? What could you learn from that feeling? And how could accurately naming that feeling help you understand your situation a little more clearly. Now that you have a little bit more insight, is there a better way for you to handle that situation next time? So with SEL, these are the kinds of questions that adults and children learn to answer in order to build better understanding and solutions for themselves. Learning about our feelings, to identify them, to look at the thoughts around them, the patterns they create, that's all EQ. And when we make those small changes, we're changing the way we show up in our conversations and our relationships with other people. And that has an effect on them. Now, can you see how that ripples outwards and how it scales up really quickly? So let's keep thinking about the changes that we want to make in the world and our SDG actions. How can we make small changes every day to power those long-term goals? So I want to send you home with a little bit more EQ in your pocket, and inside that envelope is one more thing for you, which is a card with this URL on it. And I've selected some resources for you, including the slides I've shared today, so when you go there, you'll find all these materials. I hope that that will get you started or take you further on your EQ journey. 6 Seconds is a global nonprofit, and we have allies in 174 countries. And on behalf of the whole 6 Seconds network, I'm feeling all their spirit here and online, and I'd like to make you an offer. We are here to support you. We are all in this together. Our success in achieving the SDGs requires us to harness all of our collective talents and energies, and standing on the shoulders of some amazing people who've gone before us, we will reach up and outwards to do this work. And now, to conclude, we've talked a lot about emotional intelligence and the SDGs, and I'd like to leave you with just one last question. Looking at these goals and thinking about the important work you're doing, how are you feeling? Now, you might have a whole range of emotions, from frustration to joy, overwhelm to excitement, commitment, and maybe hope. And our work today and tomorrow is to harness the power of those emotions and to use them as fuel to help us build a future for our children. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patricia, and thank you for being able to personalize the SDGs yet again in the context of the framework that you suggested to us. And now it's my privilege to invite Rich Fernandez. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you so much. Esteemed friends, hello. Those of you who are tuning in online, hello. Here we stand in the United Nations headquarters in New York, or you're beaming this in from wherever you are in the world. So welcome, and I just want to be mindful that this is actually a historic moment, right? This is the United Nations, and we are talking about mindfulness and emotional intelligence and how that operationalizes the goals of this institution. Perhaps more importantly, and on topic, what does this mean to you? Yeah? So I would like to invite you for a brief reflection, which I like to call the 3 whys. I'm also mindful that whether you are here in person or whether you're tuning in, you may have been sitting for a while. So if you are able, I would invite you to stand. If you prefer, you could also stay seated. But if you'd like, I would invite you to stand. Those of you who are tuning in as well, same applies for you. And I'd like to invite you, first of all, to take a little bit of a stretch in whatever way feels comfortable, because we've been sitting for a while and listening for a while. And after you've moved your body in whatever way is suitable for you, I'd invite you to close your eyes if you like, or simply soften your gaze, your preference, and connect for a moment with your breathing. Take a deep breath. And I'd like to invite you to consider these 3 whys for your own self. Why are you here? And further, I'd like you to consider again, why are you really here? And feel into that. See if any sensations arise in your body, any emotions, any thoughts. And finally, the third why, taking a deep breath. On the exhale, relaxing your body one small measure and considering, why are you really, really, really here today in this moment? Noticing what arises with kindness and curiosity. And as you're ready, you can open your eyes and rejoin this group. Thank you, and if you'd like, you can have a seat. Same online. So thank you for that. I hope that was insightful. And it really goes to the topic of the day, which is emotional intelligence and mindfulness. And I have the task today of presenting emotional intelligence and mindfulness as we're seeing it in the private sector. So again, my name is Rich Fernandez, and I work at, I'm the CEO of the Search Inside Yourself Leadership Institute, where we do mindfulness and emotional intelligence training for communities and organizations around the world. We operate in over 50 countries. And if you're wondering about the goofy name of this institute, it's because we actually originated at Google. This is a curriculum that was developed at Google, which, as you may be somewhat familiar, is in the business, one of the businesses of search, right? Except for this curriculum, because it's a mindfulness and emotional intelligence-based curriculum, the idea is to search inside yourself. And we see ourselves as a leadership institute because that is a leadership skill that we hope to propagate around the world. But the question is, why is there interest in this in the private sector? Why? Well, some of you may be familiar with a reality that looks like this. Yeah, our devices, the hyperconnectivity, the 24/7 nature of what we do and where we work, the distraction that results, the stressors, the time scarcity, the global nature of our current work, the velocity of it, leaves us not feeling so good sometimes. It sometimes feels like this, doesn't it? That our brains are scrambled, that it's hard to have mental clarity, calmness, and stability, that it's hard to distinguish the signal from the noise, as they like to say, yeah? In fact, some have described this as the attention economy. I love this quote from the McKinsey Quarterly, that always-on, multitasking work environments are killing productivity, dampening creativity, and making us unhappy. Right? So, what to do about it? You've heard from so many of the distinguished speakers today that emotional intelligence is a key competency, and that it's a skill, and like all skills, we can develop it. How do we know this? Dr. Daniel Goleman spoke to some of this. It's because we have the capacity for neuroplasticity. Many of you will be familiar with this term. If you're not, it simply means that the structure and function of our brains can change depending on what we do, think, and pay attention to. Neurons that fire together, as they say, wire together. And so we can literally, with intention, change the structure, literally grow gray matters in our brain, and the function, the connectivity between different neural networks, and the capacity for them to be in dialogue with each other, to develop awareness, to develop self-regulation, to develop social awareness and relationship management skills. And so a lot of research is now coming out that suggests you can actually change the structure of your brain, the function of your brain, in a lot of these areas of your brain that are responsible for these functions: attention, decision-making, positive emotion, stress response, decision-making quality, emotional balance, empathy, and compassion. You can actually change your brain's capacity and function in all of these areas. So what? This is the question we get a lot when we talk to the private sector. Thank you for the neuroscience lesson. Thank you for the very heartful practice around intention. But so what? We're in the business of business, so what? Well, if you look at the World Economic Forum's recent Future of Jobs report, 2018, you see that emotional intelligence is one of the top 10 skills they see for the future of jobs. That in fact, by 2022, we will need emotional intelligence right alongside systems thinking analytical thinking, critical thinking, innovation, and all of these complex problem solving and all of these other skills that you see on this list, right? So it literally is not only necessary now, it will be necessary for future readiness. Similarly, in the recently published Deloitte is a global human resources consultancy, and they do these global surveys of the workforce. The Human Capital Trends Report from 2018, as you see here, suggests that our organizations themselves are changing. They're no longer functional siloed organizations. They're primarily concerned with their internal metrics around shareholder value add. They're much more concerned now with stakeholder value add, trying to make an impact in the world in a larger ecosystem with an external focus. And what that necessitates internally is a move away from a siloed functional organization as an operating model to one that is more, I love the word here, symphonic, a network of teams working together globally to achieve the goals of increased collaboration, higher internal agility and collaboration, ultimately going up to the top right with the rise, as they say in the report, of the social enterprise. That the purpose of business is to improve the state of the world in many ways. And this is an increasing realization that for sustainable organizations, for organizations that truly add value, that is the difference. That is the corner that needs to be turned. It's not necessarily the reality we're living now, but it's a reality that's emerging and becoming much, much more important. So, what does emotional intelligence have to do with it, and how does it enable effectiveness in organizations? So, from our data, we know, again, operating in over 50 countries, what we know is that it enhances leadership, sustains performance, and enables well-being along these dimensions. That emotional intelligence, if you could practice it as a skill, which so many of our distinguished speakers offered today as a practice, as a toolkit, we know that when you can grow these capacities of emotional intelligence, it increases empathy and compassion. It increases, as you see there, the ability to resolve conflicts and to build trust. The ability to be then responsive and agile on the leadership axis. On the performance axis, the ability to train and direct your attention and sustain it tends to promote productivity, collaboration, and innovation, because you're able to listen, right? You heard our last speaker say, listen, let's learn to listen, right? All our speakers said that, actually. And then effective decision-making based on our insights. Finally, well-being. It seems that when we can tap into our emotions and be mindful, we are happier. So, but what's the evidence? That's a nice model. Thanks for the pretty slides. But what is the actual evidence, right? This is, what we get asked all the time by organizations, as we should. So I would like to share with you a little bit about our architecture and the results we've seen, our architecture around building emotional intelligence. So the basis is neuroscience. We know that we can activate certain regions of the brain, and we can do that through intentional practice and deliberate techniques and specific exercises. So from the basis of neuroscience, we do these techniques, which are largely called mindfulness, right? That is the basis, that is the foundation, that is the building block, and they enable emotional intelligence. This is a curriculum, like I said, that we developed at Google over 10 years ago. I was an employee there. I'm a psychologist by training, so I was one of the earlier teachers of this at Google, and we pulled together a number of world experts, including Dr. Daniel Goleman, Dr. Richie Davidson, Mirabai Bush, a whole number of world experts on emotional intelligence, and we created this curriculum, which 10 years ago it started and now has rolled out to over 50 countries, and as you see, in sector-diverse organizations in the private sector largely, but not exclusively. We work with universities, we also work with civic governments and so forth. But you could see the range of organizations, from technology companies to financial services to human capital and universities and so forth. And the architecture is that we always emphasize experiential practice, right, of the kind you've been doing here with some of the speakers, as well as scientific basis and concepts and ideas. It's useful to have a definition of emotional intelligence, isn't it? It's useful to have a map. And then we always try to apply these to work. We support it all by digital learning and by ongoing collaboration and communication and practice together, as you see here. So what what do we learn? What are some of the outputs of this, having offered this in over 50 countries? We know that participants report greater ability to stay focused, as you see here. And this is an item level dimension, double-digit changes on the ability to optimize their mental state, the ability to exercise greater resilience and mental readiness to meet daily challenges. As you can see here, again, double-digit changes at the item level. And then an increased ability to maintain calm and poise in challenging situations. And just one last thing to share is a brief case study, which is from a global technology client of ours, which is SAP, who literally puts thousands of their employees through our curriculum every year. And here's what we know. Over time, those who exercise the skills of mindfulness and emotional intelligence show these results: greater well-being, meaning and engagement with their work, reduced stress, greater creativity, enhanced relationships, communication, and collaboration. Pretty cool, right? Those are good outcomes for an organization. And they actually have direct line business results because operating profit and employee engagement. You retain talent and you actually make more money. And there's some studies published on exactly this set of parameters as well. So I'll leave you with something to consider, a possibility. If it is the case that emotional intelligence enhances leadership, sustains performance, and creates well-being, the proposition then is that emotional intelligence can operationalize the Sustainable Development Goals. If, for example, we want to have no poverty, zero hunger, quality education, gender equality, peace, justice, and strong institutions, action on climate, the proposition is that to get there, we need to work together with mindfulness and emotional intelligence to achieve those goals. And I would even suggest that it is not a proposition, that it is a necessity, because we're all humans working together towards these goals. And may that day come soon when through these practices we achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So with that, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fernandez. Thank you for that connection once again between your work in a search engine and then bringing that home to us in terms of the inner searchings that you have compelled us to think about. And now it's my privilege to invite Lilian Umuhoza to share her experiences with us, some of which will be, I think, really intensified by your personal experience and all that you've done. We're very honored to have you with us. Please.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Lilian Umuhoza. Thank you all for being here, and thanks to the United Nations Academic Impact for organizing this wonderful event. I am from Rwanda, and I did my education in peace and conflict studies at Juniata College in Pennsylvania. Actually, I'm graduating tomorrow. Thank you. Yeah. So today I'm here as a board member of Survivors Fund, a UK-based organization that supports genocide survivors in Rwanda. And I'm also a founder of a retreat for women genocide survivors, a program that supports women who experienced rape during the genocide. And I've been, it's in collaboration with Survivors Fund that I've been doing this work in the last 3 years. And that's more about that passion came more about my personal experience that I'm going to talk about here. So my presentation is going to be a little bit different from the previous speakers because it's based on a personal on a personal experience and the work that I've been doing. And because where I come from, not everyone is aware that even emotional intelligence is a thing. So that's also something that I have to warn you about. Yeah, so 25 years ago, my world fell apart. I was 2 years old. That was in 1994, during the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. In this tragedy, it's estimated that 1 million people were killed in 100 days. I lost my father in this tragedy, and a large number of my family members. Even though I was too young to recall what happened, like other young genocide survivors, I grew up facing the consequences of this tragedy in every corner of my life. I feel so honored and very blessed that I survived with my mother, who's sitting there. She came for my graduation. And the reason I always say that it's a blessing, it's because most of my peers grew up in orphanages. They don't know what having a father and or a mother, having parents, how that sense of family feels like. So it's a blessing, and it's something that in my community we don't take for granted. And as I said, I grew up in a country that was completely destroyed. And when I say completely destroyed, it's not about only the infrastructure, but also the social fabric of the society, and the people's hearts were completely destroyed. At the age of 12, when I was starting the adolescent stage, I started to experience trauma that was manifested into depression, frustration, anger, and confusion. As I was trying to make sense of something that will never make sense, the genocide. Because even the people who witnessed it, they can't have a language to explain deeply what happened to them. The most part of my life that was affected is education. I was smart in school since a very young age, and at the age of 12, as I said, that's when I was starting middle school. My trauma started to affect my education. I remember that I repeated eighth grade because my grade dropped from 90% to 40% in a semester. And nobody knew how to support me. Nobody, my parents, my teachers, everyone, they were like, we have never seen this case before. We don't know what to do. I was fighting a battle with my emotions. I was fighting a battle that nobody knew about. I was able to move forward and to be who I am today and to be able to stand here and tell you about my experience because I received psychological support. And this came, I went to a school called Agahozo Shalom Youth Village. I don't know if you have heard of that institution. It's, and here is where I was able to access therapy. Agahozo Shalom is an organization that offers formal and informal education to the young Rwandans who are affected by the aftermath of the genocide. It was founded by late Anne Heyman, who passed away, unfortunately, some years ago. When Anne Heyman learned about the lack of systematic solution to support the well-being and development of Rwandan orphans, as a Jewish, she recognized that to address their orphans' crisis following the Holocaust, Israel built residential communities that ensure the orphans' safety, security, and development. So Anne drew from that model from Israel and bring the same model to Rwanda. So at SYV, we were given, as young genocide survivors, we were given opportunity to education that has mental health as a foundation, which helped myself and many of the other young survivors to come back to term, experience academic success again, and mental stability. So we were introduced to being aware of our emotions, control our emotions, and express our emotions. And the support I received compelled me to support my fellow genocide survivors. We're gonna watch a video that speaks more than than how I can speak.
Kuvuga kwanjye kwari ukurira, kurebana n'umuntu gutya amaso ku maso, numva uri busome ko mfite ibibazo mu mutima, uri bumenye ko nafashwe ku ngufu. Zimwe mu ngaruka nagize nyine ikibazo cyo kurwara uburwayi budakira, ubwandu bwa virusi itera sida. Mu byuririzi byabayeho hajemo n'icyuririzi kije no ku maso, bituma rero n'amaso ndavuza, ariko amaso biza kurangira n'ubundi amaso atakaje ubushobozi bwo kubona.
Twari tukiri abakobwa, turi abana benshi, harimo abo bishe, hari n'abo bafashe ku ngufu. Harimo bafashe ku ngufu ntibabatera inda, harimo abo bafashe ku ngufu babatera inda, ndetse n'indwara zidakira.
Guteza amatwi uko aba bose bavugaga bikwereka yuko tugifite urugendo rwo gufasha abacitse ku icumu rya jenoside gukira, cyane cyane abagore.
Even though I knew that rape is one of the weapons that have been used during the genocide, in 2016, it was my first time to hear a story of a woman who experienced rape during the genocide in Rwanda. Then I started thinking about what I can do to support those women, because for them it's not only about surviving the genocide, they live with the consequences of the genocide. A large number of them, they are HIV positive because of rape, and they have children born of rape. Everything around them is a memory of what happened to them in 1994.
Ihungabana riturutse ku bugome bw'umuntu biri muri Remera, hanyuma iyo wongereyeho no gufatwa ku ngufu, nanone uburemere burongera bukikuba. Ikindi kibiremereza cyane nuko hari ibintu byoroha kubwira abantu, kubera ko haba harimo ipfunwe, harimo no kwicira urubanza, biri mu bifungirana umuntu cyane ku buryo abo badamu n'abana babo bo bibona, sosiyete babona ikabafungirana gusa ku gikomere no ku buryo abo bana bavutse. Ntago bagomba kwitwa abadamu bafashwe ku ngufu, kuko bafite ibindi bikoze identite zabo.
I thought about a retreat that can bring together some of these women, for them to have a safe space where they can share their stories with the guidance of counselors and psychologists to help each other heal and find strength to help them move forward in life.
Survivors Fund works to empower genocide survivors in Rwanda and the UK. Among our work is to support women who were raped during the genocide and have children born as a result of these rapes.
Aha hantu haranejeje, iri huriro ryaranejeje cyane. Hari nubwo naryamaga sinsinzira, ariko buriya naragiye kuko twari tuganira n'uriya twabonanye, akambwira amateka, yakambwira ukuntu yarwaye sida, ukuntu bamutaye, nsanga jewe ahubwo ibyanjye byasa nkaho byoroshye.
Baramutse bongewe andi mahugurwa angana nk'ayo bamaze guhabwa, bagera ku kigero gishimishije kandi kinejeje.
I think all the widows, or most of the widows we have here in Rwanda, have shown resilience of a high level. Because knowing what we've gone through during the genocide, including rape, including infection with HIV and AIDS, including destruction of property, including loss of everything. And you see people still surviving and laughing and talking. The level of resilience is very high.
The pain and sorrow of these women should be a listen to the word to turn never again into a reality. Their courage and resilience should be a good example that we don't have to let our past hold us back.
ntimuzacike intege abo mwafashije dushobora kuba ibigwari ariko abadukomokaho nzi ko natwe mu magambo twababwiye bazabigiramo umurage.
Thank you. I love whenever I have an opportunity to show to people this video because I feel like there's a presence of the survivors in this room and I feel like they're given space to share their experiences from the distance. To sum up this, through this retreat and through the work that we have done with SAF, these women are given a space where they can share their stories and be able to deal with their emotions. As I said in this video, these women live with the consequence of the genocide. It's so hard for them to move forward because everything around them is a memory. One thing that they always share with me, is that they have to take medications often because they're HIV positive, many of them. And that's something that they can't stop doing. And that itself is a reminder of what they have gone through. And my senior thesis, actually for undergraduate, was about ways to support survivors after genocide, war, or mass atrocities. And I was surprised to see how rejection is the first feeling that survivors face. And we need to put in place support that will make the survivors feel welcomed in our societies, to have the sense of belonging, because rejection is a bad feeling. And that's something that survivors face in different parts of the world. And the other way that we help these women deal with their emotions is through dancing, music, as you have seen, and also through physical activities like yoga and other ways that they can talk to themselves, closing their eyes, as we have been practicing in this room, and that has been really been effective. One of the best outcomes of this program is that we have had women who were giving up on life. When I say giving up on life, it's been 25 years since the genocide, and many of them, they stopped taking medications and they're HIV positive. That's killing yourself, but they don't have the power to kill themselves directly, but they stop taking medications because they feel like they're going to die quickly, because they're so tired of the suffering that they face. And we have had women who came to the retreat, and after the retreat, who were able to go back to taking medications. And I feel like that's saving a life. And that's what keeps giving me the courage to keep doing this. And it's also emotional, it supports me emotionally to see myself as a young genocide survivor, supporting my fellow genocide survivors. Thank you. And I have been also able to, through Survivors Fund, which is one of the organizations that's in place in Rwanda that support children born of rape, I was able to also do some work with the children born of rape. These children suffer a very deep trauma, mostly related to identity crisis. And there is conflict between their mothers, who are survivors, and they have children born from perpetrators. And also, whenever these children find out that because silence is one of the tools that most of the mothers have chosen to deal with all of that. And whenever these children find out that from their peers from school, from their neighbors, that they are born from perpetrators. Many of them, they have dropped out of school because they can't deal with that. They can't deal with that that environment where everyone is talking about their stories that they have never been able to talk with their mothers. And also it's so hard for their mothers to share their stories. Like rape is a very sensitive topic to share. So imagine sharing it with your child. It's not easy at all. And through psychological support that these children and these mothers have received, I have witnessed that if we put in place therapy after genocide, war, and mass atrocities, we can move forward as a society, as a community. And I believe that supporting survivors is one of the ways to break the cycle of silence. Because from my personal experience, I believe that if survivors are supported, there will be the tools for social change. And that can break the cycle of violence. And if we put in place system and support that helps people to deal with their emotions after a traumatic event, the survivors, especially young survivors, will be able to do well academically, to have a good performance in school, which is one of the MDGs for education, powerful education, and also justice for the survivors, which is also another goal. And I think that this will empower survivors, and there is a lot we can do on a personal level, collectively, and let's all, as we leave this room, think about our role in making sure that we are supporting survivors so that they can be empowered and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Lilian, for that extremely eloquent and moving testimony. The one point that struck me when I was watching the film that you shared with us with the subtitles is that in the language, they adopted the word genocide. They spelled it Genoside, I believe, which only shows that genocide was not a concept known to Rwanda. It was an imported concept, and they had to adapt the English word to your own language to be able to communicate this. So that, I think, in one word sums it up all, how we import horrors from other parts of the world and make them our own, and then cause the trauma, the emotional trauma, the silence you mentioned, and the physical and health trauma that you linked to that. Thank you so much. It's my privilege now to invite Alan Saith. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. We've been sitting for a long time, so if you'd like to, let's take a moment to, you can stand and stretch, and not mandatory, but okay time to do so. Loosen up the body. As Dr. Andrew Weil said, mind and body are only separate in language. Wiggle your toes. Can you feel that? Your mind is down there. The brain is a physical organ, but our mind goes way, way beyond. So, raise your hand if you cannot hear me clearly. There's a few people. Do we have volume on this? There we go. All right. So in 1987, at the age of 16, I became aware that we're in the largest extinction period since the dinosaurs, driven by human activity. This was a big freak-out moment for me. I knew that I could continue to live unconsciously or semi-unconsciously and be part of the problem, or I could consciously, intentionally choose to be part of the solution. But I didn't know what that looked like. I did know that it wasn't enough to preach and sermonize. I needed to walk the talk somehow. I needed to change my own life, but I didn't know what that looked like. And so I made it my goal to find, research, learn the best tools, processes, methodologies, modalities for how to live in harmony within ourselves, with each other, and with the planet. As poet Gary Snyder said, the change needs to happen on all levels simultaneously. So we know legislation is not enough. It's important but not sufficient. There's so much more that needs to happen. And here on this planet, and I think everybody here is part of these two revolutions that are happening worldwide. And I think of them as revolutions, and I think of them as unstoppable. And one of them is the consciousness revolution. I think emotional intelligence is part of the consciousness revolution, which is how do we deepen our interiors? How do we rise up to the occasion of the needs of the world and show up with love, show up with integrity, show up with care? And there are three questions that I think that we need to answer. So the first revolution is the consciousness revolution. The second is the ecological sustainability revolution. These do have an overlap, but they're distinct. In order to really turn the situation around, there are three questions I think are important for us to ask. The first question is, who are we? Not just consumers, right? Not just people who, I'm forgetting the name of the comedian who said, our society encourages us to spend money we don't even have, to buy things we don't even need, in order to impress people we don't even like. So we need to redefine who are we? And we need to redefine what is the good life? What is the good life? And the third question is, what is our shared destiny on this planet? There is no planet B. We're looking, but 1 light year is hard for me to wrap my mind around, let alone more than that. So this search that started in 1987 for tools, processes, methodologies brought me in kind of a roundabout way to a workshop with Dr. Marshall Rosenberg on nonviolent communication. Before this, I had designed my own major in whole system sustainability. I had studied with the School for Field Studies, studying sustainable development in Costa Rica. I was working with high school students, and some of them had some conflicts. I took a conflict resolution training, and I met someone there who invited me to this workshop with Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. So just following the path, I found myself there. And I think it was my second workshop with him where something clicked. If we are going to turn around global scale issues like climate change, like species extinction, and many others, we need to excel at cooperation and collaboration skills. Humanity needs to develop these skills. We individually need to develop these skills. And we need to spread the skillfulness in cooperation and collaboration. And emotional intelligence is a huge underpinning of this. It's hard to cooperate and collaborate with others if I don't even know what's going on inside me. So let's start a little bit with, this is a little bit how it works. NVC is short for nonviolent communication. You can see that life alienated communication down here, where we connect on images and thoughts, but not much happening at the level of the heart. So the way nonviolent communication works is we're integrating. We're getting brain and heart to work together. But I'd like to start with the name nonviolent communication because it's kind of a marketing non-starter. And it doesn't tell people what it is, it tells people what it's not. And what Dr. Rosenberg was attempting to do when calling his process nonviolent communication is he was attempting to align himself with Gandhi's social movement of nonviolence. However, in India, as many people in this room are probably well aware, in India they were using certain words in Hindi that had no direct translation into English. So in Gandhi's time, they used the words ahimsa and the word satyagraha. And ahimsa is, again, no direct translation, but roughly, I am not your enemy, or harmlessness toward all beings. it's a little bit akin to the Buddhist concept of loving kindness, ahimsa. The other word, satyagraha, again, no direct translation into English, has a little bit of a sense of soul force or soul truth or the power of the truth. So we took these two concepts of loving kindness and the power of the truth, and they got turned into nonviolence. Again, it doesn't tell us exactly what it is. It tells us what it's not. And unfortunately, people are losing a historical connection with Gandhi's movement. When I teach at, for example, a high school, I'll ask if anybody has never heard of Gandhi or doesn't know what he did, and a few courageous students who are willing to be honest in front of other people will raise their hands. So this process has other names. Compassionate communication. Empathic communication, because empathy is such a big part of it. Empowered communication, because it's not about being nice, it's about being real and about being connected with your own power. And it has some other names. I've heard in some places they teach it as conscious communication. So it goes by a lot of different names, but this starts to give you a little bit of a flavor of where it comes from and what it is. Now, Dr. Rosenberg was a student of a famous psychologist named Carl Rogers. And Carl Rogers at the time was very interested in how is it that authentic human connection can be so healing. And he noticed that sometimes the roles we play get in the way of authentic human connection. The role boss-employee, the role parent-child, the role teacher and the role student, therapist and patient. Sometimes these labels or roles get in the way of seeing each other human to human. So Dr. Rosenberg set out to distill the essential elements in language that contribute to a high quality of connection. So I want to clarify what the purpose of nonviolent communication is. The purpose is to create a high quality of connection out of which people spontaneously enjoy contributing to one another's well-being. When the quality of connection is high, we naturally want to make life more wonderful for each other. It just happens spontaneously. When I met Dr. Rosenberg, and I started studying with him in 1995, when I met him, he had been traveling the world for about 35 or 40 years, mediating conflicts and training people, and he said in every culture, people are playing one of two games. One of those games is called, who's right and who's wrong? The other game is called, how can I make life more wonderful? When there's a high quality of connection, we naturally want to play this game, making life more wonderful. I want to give you an example that might be something you've experienced in your life. Raise your hand if you've had the following experience. Perhaps you cooked dinner for someone, you had dinner guests, and they really enjoyed what you made. Raise your hand if you've had this experience. And just shout out a few people, how did that feel to you? Yeah, it's so fulfilling. Now imagine your dinner guest threatens you to feed them. What happens to that natural joy of giving? It dies. Or let's say your dinner guest tries to guilt trip you into feeding them. Same thing. So this game, Making Life More Wonderful, it turns out human beings love it. We love contributing to one another's well-being, but it only works if we have choice. As soon as I feel pressured, coerced, forced, manipulated in any way, forget it. I don't want to do it. It's no longer fun. So that's the main purpose of nonviolent communication. How to create a high quality of connection out of which spontaneously, naturally, people want to play this game. How can I make life more wonderful? I want to break that purpose down a little bit more because any communication process has both a speaking side and a listening side. So from the speaking side, how do I share my perspective? How do I speak my truth in a way that's most likely to elicit a compassionate response from the other person? That's most likely to lead to understanding rather than conflict. And how do I speak my truth in a way that's most likely to result in my own needs being met in a way that's in harmony with other people's needs? From the listening side, how can I be present to, how can I be in the face of what might come across as blame, judgment, criticism, a verbal attack? And instead of hearing those things, I'm able to put my attention to what is important to this other person, their values or their needs. Therefore, I'm getting less defensive, I'm able to stand in a more compassionate place, and I'm much more likely to be able to diffuse a potential conflict. I've transformed every significant relationship in my life using these tools, and now I'm preventing misunderstandings and conflicts before they happen. One example is I want to write a book with my ex called How We Got Divorced and Kept Our Family Together. Because no matter what great communication skills you have or how much care there is, if you want different things in life, that's okay. And changing the roles, husband and wife, doesn't have to turn into a war. And with us, we're still friends, and we greet each other with a hug. And we're not husband and wife anymore. We are friends and co-parents. And my children are benefiting from that immensely. In fact, we live next door to each other, so the kids just, they want to walk up to dad's house, they do, or they're sick of dad, they walk down to mom's house. So let me keep going through these slides a little bit. Yeah. I call this the most overlooked insight to preventing and resolving conflicts. Part 1, what not to do. Usually what happens is if there's a disconnection, we jump to a solution. We jump to fix it. I see this in families. Oh, don't worry, honey. Daddy will buy you a new one. I see this at work. Okay, fine. I will take on that extra project. I love the story about the boring holes for the wells, right? There wasn't enough communication. That was one of the things that was illustrated in that story. So we tend to jump to a solution, and those solutions are less durable, and we don't know if they're satisfying the needs of the people involved because we don't even know what those needs are. We have not taken the time to discover them. Now, when I say needs in nonviolent communication, we define that in a very particular way. We're talking about universal human needs. Of course, we have the survival needs, air, food, water, clothing, shelter. But beyond survival, the thrival needs. What are the conditions necessary for any human being to thrive on the planet? Things like love, trust, connection, autonomy, meaning I get to choose my goals and the path for how to get to them. So there's any number of universal human needs. But the word need is tricky because it connotes a sense of lack or I'm missing something. So it's a tricky word. You can think of them as values, but really they are core human motivators. They impel us to act. So universal human needs are an energy that wants to flow, not a hole to be filled. Now, within the framework of nonviolent communication, our emotions arise because our needs are fulfilled or not fulfilled. If my need for friendship isn't met, I have certain feelings. If my need for friendship is met, I have other feelings. That's a little bit of the framework of it. So what I would suggest we practice more is go slow to go fast. Slow it down and connection before solution. So when I slow it down and we get on the same page, my wonderful magical partner Tess is here, and we do this. We'll slow down and get clear what are your needs, what are my needs, before we go to create a solution. Once we're clear what's important to her, what's important to me, now the problem solving becomes collaborative. The solutions are going to be more durable because we know that they're addressing everybody's needs. This happens in groups too, by the way. I was invited to mediate a conflict in a nonprofit. There were about 10 people in the room. Somebody was crying. They started speaking. They shared very clearly what had happened, how they felt about it, and what were their needs or values that were in the way. And then they got into the next thing that had happened, and now they were really sobbing. And before they were done, somebody in the room jumped in and said, "Oh my goodness, what can we do to make things better for you? How can we solve this for you?" And before that person was done, somebody else jumped in. what happened to us as an organization? What happened to us as a system? Something fell through the cracks, and we shouldn't let this happen again. At that point, I stopped them. I said, stop. Hold on. I went back to the first person, and I said, was there something that you wanted from the group in relation to the things you shared? And she said, oh, no, I just wanted to be heard. Yeah, we could have spent an hour fixing and an hour investigating and never helped her receive the understanding that she really wanted from the other people. So I call this go slow to go fast, because if we take the time to create connections, the connection first and then the solutions, we don't have to go back and redo the solutions. If we go back to the previous slide, these solutions, when they happen in organizations and institutions, and especially when they're instituted from on high, what happens? Subtle sabotage, foot dragging, resistance, because you haven't included the concerns of the people affected by those decisions. So this was created by one of my colleagues in Balkashtan, and what you'll notice is 3 areas. Don't get distracted by all the words. But we have self-expression, honesty, being real, being authentic with others. And the left branch, we have empathy, human understanding. How am I present with you and really getting what it is that you're sharing? Now, sometimes we'll just be present and it'll be in silence. But sometimes we'll reflect out loud what our understanding is in order to demonstrate that we're getting it. Now, the third area is the roots and the trunk of the tree. And this is self-connection, and this is where emotional intelligence and mindfulness are so key. Because it turns out that our self-connection is a limiting factor to authentic self-expression, and it's a limiting factor around empathy. If I'm all churned up inside, and I'm going through emotional distress, how present can I be with you in order to listen? Not very much. If I'm holding a storm and I'm all churned up inside, or if I don't know what's going on for me, how honest can I be with you? So our self-connection is a limiting factor or a supportive factor for this work of creating high-quality connections. I want to illustrate this with a little story, and I notice I'm running out of time. So I want to add briefly that Marshall Rosenberg was interested in much more than simply interpersonal harmony. His bigger dream was really social change. And how do we create constructive conversations when we create access to the people who have their hands on the levers of power? I'm going to be honest with you. If somebody granted me a 30-minute conversation with Donald Trump, I might need 2 or 3 days of empathy before that conversation in order to make it a very constructive conversation in a short period of time. So I'll tell you a story from my teacher in this, Dr. Marshall Rosenberg. He was invited to teach at a refugee camp in Palestine, and he's entering the mosque, and there are 170 Palestinian men, and he's getting up on the stage, and his interpreter turns to him and he says, "They're murmuring that you're an American." And at that point, someone in the audience stands up, points his finger at Marshall, and yells, "You murderer!" And then other people chime in, "Child killer, assassin, butcher," and the whole room starts to get riled up. So Marshall and his interpreter are like, whoa, hold on. And then Marshall addresses the man who spoke to him, and he said, "Sir, are you upset because you would like my government to spend its resources in a different way?" The guy's like, "Damn straight. We don't need bombs. We don't need armored bulldozers. We don't need tear gas. We need schools. We need housing. We need health clinics." So Marshall, hanging in with him, said, "So it sounds like there's a sense of maybe desperateness around you wanting the world to know the kinds of conditions that you're living under. Is that correct?" And the man said, "Yes. You ever seen schools without books? You ever seen children playing in the open sewers?" So Marshall, again, staying with him, demonstrating a different quality of listening, said, "So it sounds like you only want for your children what any parent would want for their own children." The guy said, "That's right." This went on for about 40 minutes. At the end, after the guy was done talking, because he'd gotten enough empathy, he was vented out, Marshall came back with his honesty, and he said, "Sir, I'd like you to know I feel rather frustrated right now because I was invited to teach something here, so would it work for you if I just continue with my presentation?" And the guy who called him a murderer said, yeah, go ahead. So Marshall continued with his presentation. At the end of Marshall's presentation, the same man who had called him a murderer came up to the front and thanked Marshall and invited him to have Ramadan dinner with his family. So these are the kinds of shifts that are available when we have a high skill level. I have so many more stories, a lot of my own, and I'm practically out of time. Just have a couple more minutes. So, there is a model for nonviolent communication. It has two parts, empathy and honesty, also listening and speaking. And there are 4 components. You want to offer a clear observation of what happened, how you're feeling, because of what core motivator or universal human need isn't met, and then having a very clear, doable request at the end. However, the model is not nonviolent communication. Raise your hand if you're confused. Nonviolent communication, what it is the consciousness that we bring to our interactions. If my intention is to create a high quality of connection, and I'm willing to work toward a win-win outcome, a mutually agreeable, a mutually enriching outcome, that's nonviolent communication. I don't care what words you use. If my intention is to get my way, if my intention is to manipulate a specific outcome, I can use words that sound like this all day, but it's not NVC. So it's primarily the consciousness and the intentionality that we bring to our interactions. I want to point out some resources. The Center for Nonviolent Communication operates globally, based in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We have about 700 certified trainers all over the world. Work collaboratively.com. Is Dean Killian here? Did she make it in? There she is. Can you stand up just for a second? This is a local resource. This is one of the certified trainers in our network, and she's here in New York. So workcollaboratively.com. Thanks, Dean. And she has cards, and you can connect with her at the end. Anybody here from NYC-NVC? Another local resource, nonviolent communication here in New York City. NVC Academy has a lot of resources online. And lastly, this is my website, Cascadia Workshops. The word Cascadia is a tip of the hat to the bioregionalism movement. Cascadia is the name of the bioregion that I happen to live in. So in the last minute and a half that I have, I'll just tell you another quick story. I was presenting at an event. I was part of a panel. At the end of the event, somebody comes up to me and does what most of us would call yelling within maybe 6 inches of my face, telling me how my values are what's destroying the world. My first impulse was to punch this person in the face. And I noticed it. I didn't act on it. I noticed it, and it gave me some awareness that I was in pain. Before I hit somebody, I need to be in pain. And the theory behind that is, I'm hurting. So I'm going to make you hurt so you know the kind of pain I'm in. We all know that doesn't usually result in understanding. But I noticed this. So I went inside, and I worked in this area down here, the self-connection. And I got clear. I was irritated because I value a different quality of dialogue. And I was really, really disappointed because I wanted some understanding. I wanted to be seen differently. And boom, I was back. I was present with him. And I was able to give him empathy. Oh, sounds like you have some values that are really, really important to you. That's right. The dialogue continued, but it didn't escalate. So just that brief moment, using emotional intelligence, using the skills from nonviolent communication, going inside allowed me to prevent a potential conflict and begin to create a connection with somebody who came toward me quite aggressively. So thank you for your time. It's really a joy to be here, and I wish you all a great rest of the day and a great life making a difference in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan, and I must congratulate you on your Hindi pronunciation. And I wonder if you know of a connection between Mahatma Gandhi and Albuquerque. Not the Albuquerque where you live, but the house where he was assassinated was earlier on Albuquerque Road. It was named after a British Governor General. It was Albuquerque Road. He was assassinated there, and today it's named 30th January Road after the day of his martyrdom. But thank you for that presentation. And now it's my privilege to invite Chris Ruin. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Hi, my name is Chris Ruan. I'm a member of the British Parliament. I'm a Welsh MP. And can I just say what a pleasure it is to be here today for me. When I was 12 years old, I did a project on the United Nations, and I drew meticulously the big building that we're in today. And I never, ever thought I'd be here many decades later talking about mindfulness. It's lovely to be here. And can I pay tribute to the staff who work here as well, and to this institution. Now, the topic today is the SDGs and how emotional intelligence and mindfulness can help towards achieving the SDGs. I only have 15, maybe 20 minutes to talk on this issue, so I'll just concentrate on a few of the SDGs that I think mindfulness can help. The obvious one for me, and the one I'll talk about, is peace, justice, and especially the institution. I've helped to introduce mindfulness to the British Parliament. SDG 3, good health and well-being. SDG 4, quality education. SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, along with SDG 9, industry and innovation. And finally, perhaps responsible consumption, SDG 12. I've been a politician on and off for 22 years, but before that, I was a primary school teacher in the same school that I went to when I was 3 years old. I was a right old Billy Backwater. And in 1987, the school was being inspected by Her Majesty's Inspectorate. The staff got the jitters, the head called the school nurse in, and she taught us about meditation. It wasn't mindfulness, it was tension and release, and it was the use of the breath. I got so much out of this that I wanted to pass it on to the 40 children in my class. So I started to use it. I used it when the children came in from the playground on a wet and windy playtime. They'd come in and they'd be all over the place. And I would sit them down and I would get them to breathe for 1 or 2 minutes, and their focus and their attention was there. I would use it, it was a Catholic school, I would use it in assembly with 300 children in the junior schools. And I would tell a story from the Bible, and I would use the meditation, visualization to put them in the moment. I would get them to feel the hot sand on their feet, to feel the salt spray on their face, to hear the flapping of the sails. And by putting them there, the responses that came from those children were fantastic. I would use it at the end of the day to calm them down. And they would leave the classroom to meet their parents like this. And the parents would say, "What have you done to my child? Please come home and do some more of it." So, what is mindfulness? This is the classic definition, and I know there are lots of mindfulness practitioners in here. This is John Kabat-Zinn's, perhaps the most used definition of mindfulness. The one I want to use, how was it explained to me in the House of Commons by Professor Mark Williams from Oxford Mindfulness Centre, is this is your body and this is your mind. And that many people live their life with the body in the present moment, but their minds slung back to the past where nasty things happened to them. And their minds cogitate, and they go round and round in these negative thoughts. Some people live their life like this, projecting to the future. And Mark taught us by using the breath, time and time again, it is possible to locate yourself in the present moment. So whatever that is, whether it's talking at the United Nations, whether it's a beautiful sunset or looking into your child's eyes, you are fully present. So that's the definition that I've used. And in our course in Parliament, it was the mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. So as well as the breath, it was how we made sense of the world, how we looked at the world. And we learnt skills on this. We learnt about silence. That's a quote from the French philosopher and mathematician Blaise Pascal. All human evil comes from a single cause, man's inability to sit still in a room. And I think that's a truism. And here's another one from a former secretary of the United Nations, Dag Hammarskjöld. He said, there is a silent space in every human. When you're going to make important decisions, you need to get in contact with that inner space. The silent room in the UN building will be a place to easier get in contact with that inner silence. And there is a meditation room, a silent room upstairs, which I hope to see later. So we learnt about silence. We learnt about breaking habits. Aristotle said, you are what you repeatedly do. And some of that repeatedly doing is good, and some of it is bad. And if you can break down those little habits, you can break down the bigger habits. We learnt about gratitude, that there is a negativity bias, that our negative thoughts are 7 times stickier than our positive thoughts. Our negative thoughts are like Velcro, and our positive thoughts are like Teflon. And by using gratitude on a daily basis for the little tiny things in life, you can alter that. We learnt about the difference between a reaction and a response. There's the Viktor Frankl quote. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. So the difference between a reaction and a response, even if it's half a second, can save your marriage, can save your career, and can save you from going to jail. It's a fantastic skill which can be taught. We learnt about nourishing and depleting. We were asked to write down all the activities that nourished us and all the activities that depleted us. And to think about a time that we were in crisis. And the first thing you do is throw away the things that nourish you and take on the things that deplete you until you go down in that vortex and you're broken. So we learn how to keep those nourishing and positive things in perspective. Now, we took mindfulness meditation to Parliament 6 years ago, and in that time, we've trained 250 British parliamentarians, 350 members of their staff, and in a separate but parallel initiative, 3,000 senior civil servants. We have sprinkled that institution, or those institutions of politics and government, with mindfulness, and they are bearing fruit, as you will see in a video I will show of the British Prime Minister in a moment. Different MPs have said that they've had different benefits from mindfulness. Mindfulness, Chris Cullen, our beautiful, fantastic teacher, said mindfulness doesn't come in through the front door, it bubbles up through the floorboards, and it affects different people in different ways. And this is the Conservative co-chair. We are a cross-party group, left and right, meeting together, leaving our politics at the door to develop these inward human gifts. And Tim said that there is an affinity amongst those who've been through this mindfulness course and a rather more considered approach to exchanges of differing views. Now imagine if we had that. I won't mention any countries, but it's quite near to here. And in our own country in times of Brexit. So the other gifts that have been quoted are gifts of compassion, of awareness, of patience, of less black and white thinking, and for myself, it's the old hypocrisy. When I start to point the finger like that, quite often that finger comes back and says, well, hold on, you did that. So that my hypocrisy-ometer has developed over the years. Now, Gandhi said, and we've had lots of references to Gandhi, he's one of the greatest human beings that's ever lived. He said, that you must be the change you want to see in the world. How do you turn the personal into the political? And that's what we were tasked with. We've felt the benefits of mindfulness for ourselves in our personal lives. How do we take it out into public policy? So, and there are many areas that need fixing, as the Sustainable Development Goals tell us. And one of the greatest, which has been highlighted by the United Nations and by the World Health Organization, is depression. By 2030, depression, just depression alone, not mental illness per se, depression will be the greatest health burden on the whole of the planet. What are we using to combat depression? In the main, antidepressants. Antidepressants have their place in society. They're good to stabilize people in the short term. But this graph shows you the countries that are using antidepressants and the increase from 2000 to 2013. On top of the league, Iceland, Australia, Portugal, Canada, Sweden, the United Kingdom, Denmark, New Zealand, Belgium, Finland, Spain, Austria. Mindfulness has been accepted in the United Kingdom since 2004. The science behind mindfulness has been proven to the National Institute of Clinical Excellence and has been in place. The take-up has been minimal. I ask other countries here, assess that mindfulness. Maybe it would be a very valuable tool in, to fix depression in your own country. Inequality is one of the SDGs, how we combat inequality. It's not just about an economic issue. The impact of inequality has a massive impact on health, education, and mental health. The total cost is greater of mental ill health is greater than cancer, diabetes, and respiratory ailments put together. In the United Kingdom alone, that is £107 billion. A huge amount of money that could be invested in SDGs in our own country and through our aid package abroad. So how do we become the change we wish to see in public policy? We had a parliamentary inquiry. We had a parliamentary inquiry called the Mindful Nation Inquiry. And if I can just highlight, Jamie, if you can stick your hand up. The Mindfulness Initiative in the United Kingdom helped us to bring this report about. And it was a great report, and it's had much critical acclaim from around the world. And we had 80 witnesses that gave evidence at 8 parliamentary sessions taken in the House of Commons. The report, the final report, which I have in front of me, it's a hard copy report, but it's also online, and I will give you the web address for that at the end, the hyperlink. So 80 witnesses, 8 sessions, and 250 references. When we launched the documents in October 2016, I'm a Labour MP, I'm a Socialist MP. When we launched it, 3 Conservative ministers spoke at the event. This has been a genuinely cross-party affair. We looked at mindfulness in the prisons, in the criminal justice system. We looked at mindfulness in education. And if I can draw your attention to a Oxford Mindfulness Centre research project called Myriad, My Resilience in Adolescence, which will report next year, 2020, maybe 2021, which could change the face of education around the world. Where Professor Mark Williams, again, along with Willem Kijken and others, are looking at 26,000 students between 11 and 18 in the United Kingdom and getting a baseline of their mental health, choosing 4,000 of them to look at in a randomized control test. 2,000 will have no mindfulness over a 3-year period, and 2,000 will at different interventions, high level, medium level, and with apps. So we hope to conclusively and scientifically prove that mindfulness does have an impact and at what level. And if that does happen, then as well as reading, writing, and arithmetic, we'll have resilience to help young people cope with the slings and arrows that will be flung at them through their lives. Now, this is a video. Can you do this? This is a video of the British Prime Minister, a question that I put to her in February of this year about mindfulness. And I ask you to listen to the hears of the MPs. 150 of them had been trained. Here is parliamentarianese for I agree, I agree. The hears around the chamber, the fact that the Prime Minister had such grasp of detail, the fact that a member of her staff had been on the course, and the fact that the British Speaker of the House of Commons had said that it worked for me, Chris Ruan, MP, who used to be naughty. So here we go.
provides.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, since 2013, 220 parliamentarians and 450 members of their staff have received mindfulness training here in Parliament. Our cross-party group has produced this report, Mindful Nation Report, into the uses of mindfulness in education, health, prisons and the workplace, and it's been well received by government. After Brexit negotiations have been concluded, when she might need to de-stress, will she meet with representatives of our cross-party group and senior scientists to look at what more can be done with mindfulness to reduce human suffering and to promote human flourishing?
Well, can I thank the honourable gentleman for raising this important issue, and also thank not just him but the Mindfulness APPG for the work that they've done and their recent report. And obviously he knows that mindfulness-based cognitive therapy is recommended for use by NICE for adults with depression. But I noticed I recognise the training that has gone into staff. I recently, well, some weeks ago, had an individual from my constituency come into my surgery to talk about mindfulness, and the member of my parliamentary staff I had with me had actually undertaken the training and was therefore able to speak about the impact that had had. So the commissioning of psychological therapies is a matter for NHS England, but I'll ensure that they are aware of this report.
Gentleman is obviously a beneficiary of mindfulness himself. He seems a very calm and phlegmatic fellow these days, which wasn't always the case in the past. We're very grateful to the honourable gentleman. George Freeman.
I was prone to overexcitement. And still am. So, we've had our inquiry, and it's been a great success. But it's not just in the United Kingdom where we've made progress. Over the past 9 years, mindfulness has been developed in the Swedish Parliament in 2011, on Capitol Hill by Tim Ryan in the United States in 2012, in the United Kingdom in 2013, and over the past 6 years, I, along with others, have been doing outreach work to other parliaments around the world. This is the Estonian Parliament at the top. Jamie Bristow has been out to the Sri Lankan Parliament, the Swedish Parliament, Portugal, the French National Assembly, the United Arab Emirates. The Prime Minister trained 200 members of his staff, or had Oxford University train 200 members of his staff. They have appointed a female Minister for Happiness. They are streets ahead of many countries. We've, in Tallinn, in Estonia, in the, I think that one is Finland, Finland. And in 2016, Jamie Bristow and myself went to see Congressman Tim Ryan at Capitol Hill, and he's a great man. He's written a book called Mindful Nation, which he's changed the title now to Healing Nation, on how we can bring people together in these fractured times. And Tim suggested an international congress, an international meeting of politicians who meditated. And these are we wrote out to politicians in these countries, and these are the countries where mindfulness has actually taken root, where they hope mindfulness will be introduced, and where local advocates want mindfulness, want their politicians to introduce it into the parliament. So in October 2017, we held an international conference with 40 politicians from 14 different countries sitting down together and meditating. It was a fantastic experience. So we want to now extend mindfulness to other parliaments around the world, so that those politicians, when they make those important decisions, personal or political or policy, make it from a place of balance. And if they're, there's three asks that I have. And that is, if there is anybody watching this in the room or anybody watching it on the web that thinks that they can interest their politicians or their parliaments in mindfulness, we are here, Jamie and myself and other international members of parliament around the world are prepared to help. Professor Willem Kijken from Oxford University wants to have an international version of this document, identifying best practice for mindfulness from the laboratories and from the research institutes around the world, bringing them together and getting them out to those parliaments. Again, as I said to the Prime Minister, to reduce suffering and to promote human flourishing. So if there's any country in here or out there that wants to participate in that, we're putting together a bid along with Jamie Bristow. It will be headed up by Jamie Bristow from the Mindfulness Initiative. And the third and last point, and I'll finish on this, is we have a meditation room in the United Nations, or we have a quiet room, a still room, a peaceful room. I'm not sure if we have a practice in this fantastic institution, but if you don't, again, we are here to help. So thanks once again. It's been a highlight, one of the highlights of my life to be here today, talking in this fantastic room. And our my email address and Jamie's email address and the web connection for Mindfulness Institute is up there. Please take a photograph if you want, or I've got some cards and I'll see you afterwards. Thank you very much, or as we say in Wales, diolch yn fawr iawn.
Thank you very much, sir. It's not for nothing that both the word mindfulness and your own name, Rowan, contain the letters UN. Thank you, sir. May I now, it's been very lonely here alone. Can I invite you all to join me? Lenise did keep me company for about 2 minutes, but apart from that, I've been completely bereft. So may I invite the panelists to join me on the podium, please? And I did want to mention to all of you that we will be sending all those attending a list of the many resources which were mentioned in the course of this morning by speakers. So that will reach you in the course, I hope, of the weekend or early next week. Thank you. Hi. So this is going to be a conversation. I'm just going to ask a few trigger questions, but then I hope we can open it up to a larger conversation in which you express your ideas or ask any questions. And I'll begin with Michelle. I remember that you once said that through the integration of emotional intelligence, you'll find it easier to stop and pause for an answer than leap forward and join in a conversation. And this happens all the time in this building because nations are talking to nations, and sometimes in agreement or disagreement, they interrupt each other. And often you have wonderful results, but often perhaps you lose opportunities. How do you feel this idea of conversation, of interjection, and of patience is relevant to the United Nations and the SDGs?
Okay, great. I think mindfulness helps, increase that ability to notice the moment where we can be more skillful, first of all. That's point one. Point two is that how we are aware of what we're listening for and how we're listening matter greatly. So that's a deeper level excuse me, of self-awareness. And so what I mean by that is some of us listen to respond right away. Some of us listen to solve a problem. So it's helpful if you know, if you're just listening to listen versus some other motive, which is usually through habit. And so a deeper level of self-awareness, there's an invitation to know what kind of listener you are, and then experiment with doing something a little different that might actually just involve listening to connect.
Thank you. Thanks so much for that. Rich, if I may turn to you, you had once quoted a statistic I still cannot quite grasp, that the human mind gets 11 million bits of information every second, but can process only 40 bits of information. How do you make that relevant to an organization like this in the SDGs, where we are obviously bombarded with information all the time, which we then have to make coherent?
That's a great question. So we have the lost art of reflection. And I call it a lost art because it's an innate human capacity we all possess. And the skills that we're talking about here are really the skills to be able to pause, reflect, and then respond. That doesn't happen to be a slow process necessarily, but it's to inhabit that pause, as Chris Rowan was saying, you know, that Viktor Frankl quote, that pause between stimulus and response. There's the capacity to take that pause, and in that pause, an amazing thing happens, which is we're able to sort the signal from the noise very often, not always, but very often. It is not a habit of mind that we often have, and so it requires practice. It requires us to develop the skill, and that's the tool set that we're offering here today.
Thank you. Lynn, if I may turn to you, you'd once said that many young people regard the past as not something from which they themselves have come, but something completely distant from their own experience. Looking at the Sustainable Development Goals and the fact that these seek to transform lives that were lived, how do you link that to this notion of memory and belonging?
Thank you. Yeah, so emotional intelligence helps you listen to yourself and deal with that. The fact that people don't want to deal with their past, it's because it's not a pleasant place to be. When your past is not a pleasant place to go back to, you will always avoid it. You don't want to go back. But going back to that past, to that place where you don't want to go to, is the only way, is one of the most effective way that can help you get somewhere else, like move forward. And I think that's why we need to be very mindful of our emotions, deal with it, accept ourselves, accept our past, no matter how it may be, and to be able to get somewhere else. And that's what sustainable development looks like. Yeah.
Thank you. Alan, if I may turn to you, you've quoted Gandhi in some detail, and he had once said that he saw the independence of India not just as a national achievement, but as a movement towards the brotherhood of man. Would you say that the freedom we are now seeking from poverty, from hunger, from lack of education, is something that can lead to the brotherhood or sisterhood of humanity?
I would put it the other way around. I think if when we truly take in our interconnectedness, interdependence, interrelatedness, it'll be easier to solve these issues.
Patty, if I may turn to you, your idea of stress representing not so much a threat as a challenge, and that also conditions your response to it. How do you see this in the context of how we are dealing with the daunting agenda before us for 2030?
So we have a tremendous agenda in front of us, and I think we don't have capacity to solve those problems right now. And I think sometimes we get wrapped up in a cycle of solving smaller problems because they're in some way more satisfying, because we get a little bit of a rush when we win or when we solve these easy problems. So I think we need to think a little bit more long term. Just like teaching a child is basically an investment in the future, you are visualizing that child 10 years from now going to be someone who's your caregiver or going to be one of your employees. And so I think if we can look at the world right in this moment, no, we don't have the ability to solve these problems. But if we look forward 10 years, knowing the work we have to do to build that bridge there, we can do it.
Thank you. Mr. Rowan, you had a word of advice for British politicians, and I dare say that applies to politicians elsewhere, that they should always prepare their parachutes before they need them. Would you say that's true of the United Nations as well, in the sense of being anticipatory as the Sustainable Development Goals are, but even beyond that, to contemplate situations that we hope will not happen, but which we must be prepared to face?
Yes, and those words of advice were given to me by Professor John Kabat-Zinn from UMass. He said, in American accent, Chris, work on your parachute before you need to open it. That was in 2012. So I was working on my parachute and had been working on it, and I continued to work on it. And in 2015, I lost my job. it was an election and I lost. And John emailed me and said, Chris, sorry to see this has happened. How did you get on? I said, well, I worked on my parachute, I opened it, and it worked. And it helped me in that difficult time. There's nothing as X as an XMP. And I've had my ups in Parliament and my downs in Parliament. Every one of us in this room will have that. Each institution has it, whether it be the British monarchy at the time Diane died, a backlash towards it, or whether it be the British government in times of Brexit where we're really, really low. And this institution itself will have its downs, whether that be the threat of a nuclear war or a big terrorist incident or whatever, that will throw us into the air, will produce uncertainty and chaos for this institution. And I refer back to my third request at the end of my talk. If there is mindfulness in this building, Dag Hammarskjöld said those words, introduced the silent room in 1957. He was looking forward. He had the vision to know that each and every one of our individual, the way we make our decisions individually, have an impact. So I would say, yes, this institution is going to need to work on its parachute, and I would suggest mindfulness in this building if it's not here already.
Thank you so much. And for those of you who don't know, when you leave this auditorium and go up those stairs and turn immediately to your left is a meditation room next to the mural of Chagall. Now what I'd suggest is we'll throw it open for questions and comments. I would ask the panelists to please jot down any particular observation that they wish to respond to, and we'll have them speak at the end so that we have a real cross section of opinion and ideas and a real assertion of mindfulness in this room. So please let me know who wishes to speak. Please. Yeah, just press your mic down here, please. Thanks.
Oh, can you hear me? Is that okay? First, thank you so much all for coming today and sharing your wisdom with us. My name is Valerie Marks. I'm wondering, how can we bring in the tools that you've discussed and brought to our attention into an organization to make this kind of impact on a small scale to help that ripple effect? So, like, what can I do with my company immediately tomorrow?
Thank you.
I'd be happy.
Yes, sir. We'll have everyone at the end together. Please, sir. Yeah. Just press that mic, please, sir. Thanks.
All right. So my name is Yomi from Nigeria. I was looking at how we can partner with Chris on bringing this back to Africa, because I know it's going to change a lot of things when it comes to the Sustainable Development Goals. And how can we get that involved? In my own little way, my organization, all my workers, early in the morning, we have mindfulness session, but that's not a universal thing. How do we benefit from what Chris is doing to make it democratized in a way? Thank you.
Wonderful. How can we bring that into the United States, where there is such divisiveness and such terrible lack of mindfulness here? How do we bring that consciousness to our government here?
Yes, please. Yeah. Yeah, start. Yeah, thanks.
Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Hi, my name is Kashana Evans. And my question is, oftentimes these are really beautiful philosophies. They're practical, they're life-changing and transformational. However, as a survivor of domestic violence, I often feel that organizations that I truly love are lacking the representation for someone to kind of give that quote unquote real talk from the horse's mouth of why this is so, why your work and our work here is so incredibly important. So if you don't have time to answer today, I'm around, but please just speak a little bit to your efforts in really expanding your community to really embrace real talk from the horse's mouth.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Anush, and I'm a research physician and also one of Daniel Goleman's coaching training. And my vision is just to bring emotional intelligence to healthcare system. I was wondering that if there is any idea or suggestion, and also how we can measure our improvement with the tools that are being offered.
Thank you. There's someone right behind you there. Yes, please. Yeah.
My name is Obeida Almonte. I'm from the Dominican Republic. I just want to share a little bit of my experience and how I'm using my emotion to help others. I'm a former homeless. I was homeless in New York City because I didn't want to have an abortion. I'm a domestic violence survivor. And I spent 5 months walking on the street of New York. I can tell you that I'm a truly New Yorker. I know every corner of New York, sleeping in benches, eating from the garbage, walking from Manhattan to the Bronx, looking for food. And after God changed my life, I have 22 years of my life helping others. Monday, Wednesdays, and Friday, we prepare a home-cooked meal, and we walk around our community looking for the homeless to give them a meal. What I call more than a meal is love. It's letting them know, even though your family, friends is not there, there's a community who's doing anything to make you feel part of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Please put a mic on here.
My name is Kathy Greenberg, and I'm very, very honored to be here and to listen to all of you today. But I do want to respond to the question about bringing this to the United States and our way of being. Number one, I've been working with the military, Department of Defense, federal agencies, law enforcement for many, many years. And you'd be surprised to know that we do a lot of emotional intelligence training in these organizations. And in doing so, we are spreading the word about lots of wonderful things that emotional intelligence does, both for the individual and for teams and for organizations. So thank you.
Thank you. Please, sir.
Partnership for the goals. How do we use emotional intelligence to foster partnerships in civic society, in governments, in communities, and among individuals that will allow these goals to flourish?
Good afternoon. My name is Kiana Crealis, and I'm currently a graduate student at St. John's. I'm actually getting my master's in international communication. And right now I work within the social media sector. So we did talk about communication and, face-to-face conversations that we can have, but most of the time we hide behind a screen. And because of this filter bubble, we fail to realize that there's another person on the other side of that. And we tend to close ourselves off to different perspectives, and we don't want to have that conversation. So my question to you is, how do we put out a respectful perspective out there in our opinions if now in this climate, being like, oh, I don't want to hear this. I'm going to have my opinion. I'm not going to listen to you. So how do we kind of engage that more on the internet and that social media aspect?
Thank you. Yes, please. Yeah. Yeah, please.
To know how best to position the message. So sometimes our business leaders do not relate to the words mindfulness or compassion. And I would like to understand how best can we position the message so they understand that this is not just the right thing to do, it's also right for the sustainability of the businesses too. with the SDG 16 of strong institutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Was this, please? Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. This is more of a response to what we were supposed to. What do we take back to our communities or to our organization, and how we can implement this? There is a new thought of leadership, a symbol of leadership in regards to organizational use of self, and it's by Dr. Mila Baker, which talks about how we take this internally and we exercise it within our lives and our communities. So I guess my gratefulness to what it was presented here, and I think all of us would take this individually to our collective families, our communities, and we can exercise it. So the know-how or the how to do this, or how do we do this tomorrow, we can start doing it right now. And that's kind of my 2 cents. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. And the last one, please, if we could have, yeah, please.
Grateful to be here. I don't know if you can hear me, if this is working. Yeah, thank you very much for being here, and thank you for making the time to. I'm very happy to see that this is happening at such a level. And now that we're living in an age of hyper-connectedness, and I feel guilty as a systems designer, someone who's pushed for hyper-connectedness and technology, and it is with all that AI and data economy, where we're living in a society where data is the new money, and the companies are making a great deal of money on data rape rather than providing services. How do we balance emotional intelligence with artificial intelligence and with maintaining a sense of self and awareness and passion and compassion for each other when we are still measuring our success and in society by financial terms and not just by impact, although we are making great strides?
Thank you very much for that. What I would now suggest is maybe, Alan, we could begin with you. And just please, if each one of the panel could respond to those points which they feel they would like to and make comments. Please, Alan.
Wow. So much to consider. So many things to think about, so many questions to coalesce. Yeah, you know, I think that the small steps are important. You want to crawl, walk, run, then fly. And so the people up here are a resource for those of you wondering how to bring it into the workplace or how to position it. I have a feeling Rich is going to talk about that last piece, how to position it. But I just encourage you to reach out. In terms of how do I incorporate this in, I believe it was someone named Valerie, the tools in the organization. I think that's who I'm going to focus my response on. I would encourage you to lead by example. If you want to bring it to your organization, first lead by example. Don't think this is for everybody else, but I don't need it. And reach out to the resources here, and there's a ton of resources out there. So I'm just going to pause there.
All right. I want to reflect. Thank you all for your deep insights and great questions. There's 3 that I want to address quickly if I can. One, and these are a couple of ones related. It seemed like how to bring this into organizations, business leaders, and other types of leaders don't respond to mindfulness was the related one. And then what does it take to bring this really into your communities and organizations? And the response to that would be speak about what's important to the organization and to the community. And then use that as the lens through which you offer this form of practice. And when I say this form of practice, I think using language is very important, right? You may not call it mindfulness, you may not even call it emotional intelligence. When I was at Google early on, nobody wanted mindfulness. But if you told them we can do some neural self-hacking, they were down for that. right? So consider how you couch this effectively in the culture of the organization, and then perhaps in terms of its priorities, like employee engagement, like meaning and purpose that really help to drive the organizational goals. The second thing I'd like to respond to, and I thank you for that question about real talk from the horse's mouth, if I might, how does this really go to places where it's most needed and it doesn't just become a nice thing to do in kind of well-heeled organizations or things we just do on our personal time. For me, that's a question about the systemic change that can happen because of mindfulness. Places where we have systemic injustice. I just spent the last 3 days in Flint, Michigan, and they're training the entire city leadership, civic, healthcare, education, and so forth to be a mindful city. And to me, that starts to affect systemic change, because otherwise, if we're practicing individually, our own mindfulness practices, our own EI practices, if we do that alone and not in community and not thinking about the larger systems of injustice or inequity, violence, and so forth, then it is just water off a duck's back. It's a nice thing to do. And then the very last, so thank you for that. And then the very last thing I would say, to the point about technology, AI, data, social media, I would pose the question back, which is that who is it that is programming the artificial intelligence, right? And what are our values, our intentions, and our objectives in so doing? So let the evolution of technology and the very usefulness of those tools become an inquiry about what it is we intend to result from those developments. So thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm going to touch on like three questions. One was like, how can we bring this to our organizations? How can we implement this like effectively in different, especially to the survivors? And how can you bring this back home in Nigeria / Africa? And I think that the example that a friend there from New Yorker, the New Yorker gave, sorry, I can't remember the name, is a good example of how, when we think about different ways to support or to bring this into our communities and organizations, we think beyond what is needed. Like, as the other speaker said, we need to think about those small steps that makes us get there. It starts in our homes. It starts within our small communities. It starts with us, and then it goes beyond. It goes to organization level and furthermore. And speaking of where to support survivors, I think I talked about it earlier, about how like my research was about how we can give effective support to the survivors. And most of the time, the reason that many organizations fail in supporting survivors, it's because they work for the survivors instead of working with the survivors. There's a huge difference between the two. Like, you're not gonna go into the survivors' world and think about how they can be supported. They're the ones who know what they are going through. They're the ones who know what kind of support that can be effective for them. So we need to be also mindful about how we bring our work to the people who need it. Are we inclusive? Do we make them part of our work? Because that's the way, that's the best way for our work to be effective for the people that we want to support. And the other question that was asked about how can we bring this back home in Africa? First of all, we need to deal with the colonization that looks like it doesn't exist anymore, but it changed the way it works, right? We have a lot of international organizations that comes, and as I said, they come in our countries and they work for the people instead of working with the people. How can someone think about how you can move forward? Like, you're the one who have experienced that. So that's the first step. Then secondly, like, it's a long journey, and it's a long journey, but as I said earlier again, on a personal and collective level, we can make a change.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to respond to Martina's question about how to position the message to leaders who may not think it's immediately obvious to them of why. And I guess I would start by asking them a question back, which is, have they ever had to make a difficult decision in the face of complexity, ambiguity, where the stakes were very high. For that, do you value self-management and the ability to think on your feet and respond skillfully? And if the answer is yes, that there's some value to being able to do those things well, then self-awareness is what is needed. And in order to build self-awareness, it's, you know, the same as if we walk through a field for the first time. If we walk through it once in a field of grass, there'll never be a trace that we were there. But if we walk again and again and again, then there'll be some trace. That is why practical application matters. And I think that plays a little bit to Kashana's question about these being beautiful philosophies. But they're only as beautiful as our ability to apply them in our own lives and in our own societies. And then I'd like to speak to Valerie's question about how can we bring in these tools. I've had, like I said at the beginning of my talk, the honor of working with Dr. Goldman and his son and our team at Key Step Media for the past 4 years to begin to crack the nut on this difficult question. And what we have come up with is a way to learn, apply, reflect again and again, and we've developed it on an online platform so that it's scalable and that it can come at a price that is doable. And it's important because we can come to these kinds of events and they're critical for our thinking to impel us to, you know, touch in with what's most important in ourselves, purpose-wise and for the globe. But unless we practice it and have some means of actually doing it, it probably won't happen. And so we've come up with a suite of offerings that we think are really well poised through that combination of connection. There was a comment on AI and technology and how, and social media. How can we use these things to actually connect? So we're doing our best to work that conundrum and to do so in a way that brings benefit. And finally, Josh, I think that what I would love nothing more than to come from today is all of the people who came and were passionate to stay connected and to actually, let's do something. Let's actually engage in an intervention together. Let's learn together and not let this be just one day. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there were two questions about the US, and I agree entirely. Mindfulness is happening in the US, probably more than anywhere else in the world. Mindfulness was introduced to the US Marines in 2009. It's in the US prison service. We have the best researchers, or some of the best researchers in the world. In the secular sector, John Kabat-Zinn, Rishi Davidson, and Daniel Goleman, and others. And in the wisdom traditions as well, where Jack Cornfield, James Barras, Tara Brach, and Richard Rohr. So we have much to learn, which goes back to my other first request, is that we need to learn from each other. I might have been a bit British-ocentric before, but there is best practice, which comes, and the question was asked, how do we get those on Capitol Hill to do it? Tim's been trying. Tim hopes to be the Democrat candidate in the presidential elections. He's a very wise man. And there is this thing called the yoga vote, I think 35% of Americans practice yoga. I think 15% practice mindfulness. So it is bubbling up from below. And in his book, Mindful Nation, he asks every reader to do something at the end of every chapter on health or education. Write to your governor, write to your senator, write to your congressman, write to the president. Let them know how you feel about this epidemic of mental ill health and imbalance in society. So don't leave it to those up there. It's the people. Invite them to your school. Get the president to meditate with a 10-year-old. I've been meditating with kids in my school. You get a lot out of it. And can I also say that was on the US? On Africa, mindfulness is happening in Africa. Mindfulness has been introduced into the King's University in Morocco All of the deans have experienced mindfulness there. Mindfulness is thriving in South Africa. President Chissano, who was victorious in the Mozambican civil war, practiced transcendental meditation. He used the wisdom that came from that to have the most successful and peaceful transition from war to peace in Kenyan jails. People at the grassroots realizing the impact of that. On social media, the division is being sown. People on Twitter are perpetually angry and they throw it out. And if you don't like it, just turn it off. I think pressure needs to come from to above to say to those tech companies, if you don't sort it out, we legislators will. And that's happening in the European Union. But also, one final one, people mentioned communities, and I think that is absolutely important, but it just shouldn't be for the white worried well who can afford £350 to go on a course. This should be in communities where the poor communities who suffer with the poorest mental health. It should be given to areas where there's gangs. And it should be explained on a cost-benefit analysis. In our report, Mindful Nation, we say that for every £1 spent, £15 will be saved. So we need to convince the treasuries in those countries around the world, this is an investment worth having.
Thank you. I wanted to mention the fourth industrial revolution, which I know a lot of us have a lot of anxiety about. We're facing AI all over the place, and we're all being recorded right now. And when you think about AI, as Rich says, who wrote the code for the AI? Probably not a lot of people who had EQ. And so the programmers behind those bots that are now going to take our jobs or tell us where to stand in line, all those things have been programmed by people who may or may not have these skills or have thought so clearly as we have been thinking today. So I just want to suggest that just because we're in a high-tech environment doesn't mean we have to give up our high-touch experiences. And it's up to us to be human in this moment. I want to tell you just a very short story of a daycare center. The teachers were inundated, this is like preschool, so they're inundated with tattling all the time, tattling. Do you guys know what I'm talking about? Like, oh, Johnny kicked me, Susie stole my lunch, or whatever the issue is, and it's forever. So they installed a tattling phone at the daycare center. And kids, if they had a complaint, could get on the phone and just tell the phone what the problem was. And in the beginning, it really reduced the number of interventions that the teachers had to experience. But after a while, it kind of wore off. And the teacher said to one of the children, well, why are you still having these problems? We gave you the tattle phone. And the kid said, yeah, but the phone doesn't listen. Now, what does that child mean by listen? I really want us to think about that, because I believe that there is a human connection and interaction that is required for being a human being. And calling a phone or calling a help desk or using a computer will never replace that human connection. And I just want to address the social media. I have 2 children, aged 18 and 20, and this has become the most damaged group of young people. There was an NIH study last month or something that came out, was tracking kids age 18 to 24 over the last 10 years, and there is a 74% increase in these young people's level of crisis for suicide and major mental health illness. Now, what is different about this cohort of young people? 10 years ago, the iPhone was invented when they were in middle and high school. So for their adolescence, when the prefrontal cortex was being developed, they were living in a virtual world that none of us understood at the time. And so they are suffering from sleep deprivation, from too much screen time, and from a culture of isolation. I know that the work we're doing here today can unlock or make a bridge and connect people, and that's really what we're charged with. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm immensely grateful to our distinguished panel and, of course, Dr. Goldman, who was here earlier. It's a privilege to have you here at the United Nations. This is an organization that was created on the premise of equality. Equality among nations, equality among individuals, equality between the sexes, equality between faiths. And what does equality begin with? EQ. So you have come home to the United Nations, and on behalf of my team, I'd like to thank you, and also on behalf of all of you, to thank the team who's been involved in this far more intimately than I have, Lenice, Bo, Matt, Matthew, Max, Jasmine, Yost, Rosie, Ruan, Sabina, Jerry, and of course, as Alison Smale said this morning, the person who really inspired this event, Fernando. Thank you. And now, before we close, we'll have a meditation exercise led by Dr. James Bristow. And after that, we shall fade into the afternoon sunset.
Good evening, everybody. You've had, is this on? No. Can we have this switched on, or do I have to do it myself? It's on. Okay, great. So yeah, good afternoon. We've had some taste of mindfulness practice this afternoon, so I'm not going to repeat that. But one point of clarification I'd like to make in this closing practice is that although mindfulness is often defined in opposition to thinking about the future or thinking about the past, being lost in that rumination that Chris described, it is actually possible to use mindfulness in the present moment to tune into that gut sense, that decision-making about action, because that's what we're here today to talk about, achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, not just being in the present. And so it's actually possible to be tethered to the present moment whilst also reflecting about what you want most to happen in the world and making that outcome more likely. So we've had a lot of input today, and we've used mindfulness to think about why we're here and what emotional intelligence could do for us in the future. So I'd like us to, in this closing practice, reflect on one action, 2 actions, 3 actions, concrete things potentially that you'd like to move forwards with. And the practice I want to share with you, you can use at any time. It's in the mindfulness-based cognitive therapy course, this 8-week course called the 3-step breathing space. So it goes from, it's like an hourglass like this, all right? So, or you have the analogy age, A-G-E, for you acknowledge what's going on, you open to everything, you gather the attention in, and then you expand and potentially move forwards into the future, okay? So if you guys are ready, then we'll just find a posture that works for you, something that's alert and upright, but also relaxed. We'll only have 2 minutes for this, so we'll just start by checking in with everything that's present for you right now. The sound of my voice, the feeling of air on your skin or clothes on your body, buttocks on the chair, feet on the floor, and the breathing as your body breathes. Acknowledging the sense of aliveness or stimulation from all that we've heard today. Stretching the awareness across the whole body, acknowledging discomfort as well as pleasant feeling. And then when you're ready, gathering that into the place in the breath perhaps that you most feel the breath most strongly. It can be a help to put your hands on the belly to feel this. Just gathering the mind here and now. In breath and out breath. And when you're ready, from this point in the breath that we're bringing our mind back to, then seeing how much of the body breathes. How much of the body can you feel the breath in? Could be the abdomen, the lower back, shoulders, chest, mouth and nose. And then expanding that awareness further to include the whole body, like the beam of a flashlight, broadening from a narrow beam to a wide sense of awareness. Sitting here, stretched awareness. And then letting that focus go. Let your mind be free for a moment. Go anywhere it wants. Before dropping in the question, what do I want to take from here? What do I want to do? And your body might answer. Your gut might tell you. Or you might get a felt sense of who you want to connect with, what ideas you want to follow up. And then silently making a promise to yourself. Setting an intention as deep as you can to make that a reality. And perhaps feel into what that intention does to your system. Does it bring joy or aliveness or excitedness? Because joy is an important part of any action. That has sustainability embedded in it. And when you're ready, broadening your awareness again to include the room and those around you, and opening your eyes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend.